There is a particular kind of silence that falls just before the world changes forever. It is the height of a golden, sweeping summer, a season that feels as though it might simply stretch on into eternity. The air is thick with the scent of blooming linden trees, warm dust, and the sweet, heavy perfume of wildflowers swaying in the tall grass. The sunlight pours over the vast, rolling fields like warm honey, turning the sprawling meadows into oceans of amber and green. It is a time of soft breezes and long, lingering twilights, where the sun seems reluctant to sink below the horizon, painting the evening sky in bruised purples, gentle pinks, and the softest shades of peach. In the small, quiet villages that dot the western edges of the land, the days are measured not by clocks or calendars, but by the simple, rhythmic tasks of ordinary life. The world is built on routine. It is built on the predictable, comforting heartbeat of the everyday. You can hear it in the rhythmic thud of an axe splitting firewood behind a small wooden house. You can hear it in the gentle, splashing laughter of children chasing frogs along the muddy banks of a slow-moving river, their bare feet sinking into the cool, dark earth. You can smell it in the kitchen windows that stand wide open to catch the evening breeze, breathing out the rich, yeasty scent of baking bread and boiling cabbage. Inside one of these homes, a mother stands behind her young daughter, gently gathering her soft, fine hair to weave it into a long braid. Her hands move with practiced ease, a quiet, soothing repetition. She hums a low, nameless melody, a song passed down through generations, meant only to calm and to comfort. The daughter leans back against her mother's apron, her eyes heavy with the sleepiness of a long day spent running in the sun. There is an absolute, unquestioned certainty in this room that tomorrow will be exactly like today. That the sun will rise, the bread will be baked, and the hair will be braided once more. It is a profound, unburdened innocence. They are simply living, entirely sheltered in the warm embrace of the present moment. Just a few miles away, where the forests thin out and the land meets the quiet, invisible line of the border, the soldiers are gathered. But in the soft light of this summer evening, they hardly seem like soldiers at all. They are mostly just young men, farm boys, and factory workers, wearing tunics that feel a little too stiff and boots that are a little too heavy. There is no sense of looming dread in these border camps. The frontier is just a quiet river, a line of ancient, whispering birch trees, a stretch of meadow where the crickets sing just as loudly as they do back home. The camp is filled with the mundane, peaceful sounds of men simply passing the time. In the shade of a white oak tree, a small group of young men sits in a circle, peeling potatoes into a tin bucket. They are laughing, swapping stories about girls from their hometowns, arguing good-naturedly about whose mother makes the best cherry preserves. One of them, a boy with a smattering of freckles across his nose, leans back against the rough bark of the tree. He holds a small, silver harmonica to his lips, closing his eyes as he practices a simple, melancholic folk tune. The notes drift up into the warm air, mingling with the rustle of the leaves. It is a clumsy, beautiful sound. Further down the line, another young man sits alone on a wooden crate, his back hunched over his knees. In his lap rests a small piece of coarse, lined paper. He holds a stubby pencil, pressing it carefully against the page as he writes a letter home. He does not write about grand ideas or sweeping philosophies. His world right now is very small and very precious. He writes to ask if the roof on the barn has been patched yet, worrying that the late summer rains might ruin the hay. He writes to his younger brother, telling him to be good to their mother and to make sure the dog doesn't wander too far into the woods. He writes to a girl with laughing eyes who promised to wait for him, telling her that the stars here look exactly like the stars back home, and that he looks at them every night and thinks of her. He forms each letter slowly, carefully, his handwriting slightly uneven. The ink smudges just a little where his warm hand rests on the paper. He pours all of his longing, all of his gentle hopes into these few paragraphs. When he is finished, he folds the paper with great care, smoothing the creases with his thumb. He tucks it safely into the breast pocket of his tunic, right over his heart. He tells himself he will hand it to the mail carrier tomorrow. Tomorrow. It is such a gentle, comforting word. A promise of time that he fully believes he has. He pats his pocket, feeling the reassuring crinkle of the paper, and smiles to himself in the fading light. Across the continent, thousands of such letters are being folded. Thousands of quiet promises are being made in the dusk. They are fragile paper boats carrying the simplest, purest desires of the human heart, to be warm, to be loved, to return home. As the long twilight finally surrenders, the night gently blankets the earth. These are the shortest, sweetest nights of the year. The darkness is never truly absolute. A faint, silvery glow lingers on the horizon, refusing to fully yield. The air remains incredibly warm, carrying the trapped heat of the day, wrapping around the sleepers like a thick, velvet quilt. The camp slowly falls silent. The harmonica is put away. The potato peels are cleared. The young men lie in their bunks or out on the soft grass under the open sky, their chests rising and falling in slow, steady rhythms. You can hear the soft murmurs of someone talking in their sleep, dreaming of a kitchen table far away. You can hear the occasional, restless shift of a horse in the nearby stables, the soft snort of breath in the dark. The sentries stand at their posts, leaning against the cool trunks of the trees. They blink heavy eyelids, fighting the deep, overwhelming urge to sleep. They look out across the quiet river, across the dark fields. There is nothing to see but the gentle swaying of the shadows, nothing to hear but the rhythmic chorus of the frogs and the crickets. The world feels incredibly peaceful, incredibly still. It is a night that feels as though it was meant only for dreaming. In the villages, the houses are dark. The mother who braided her daughter's hair is asleep, her breathing deep and even. The children are lost in their dreams, their limbs sprawled comfortably across their narrow beds. The gardens are quiet, the heavy heads of cabbage resting in the dark, damp soil, waiting for the morning dew. As the hours slip past midnight, the silence begins to change. It deepens. It stretches out, becoming something entirely profound. The wind, which had been softly rustling the leaves of the birch trees all evening, suddenly drops away completely. The branches become utterly still. The long grass stops swaying. Even the crickets seem to pause their endless song. It is a heavy, velvet quiet. The kind of stillness that feels almost physical, pressing gently against your ears. It is the breath before the thunder. The earth itself seems to be suspended in time, hovering in a fragile, glass-like state of grace. It is a moment of pure, uninterrupted peace, beautiful and heartbreaking in its absolute perfection. If you could capture this exact second, you would find a world entirely untroubled, a world that knows nothing of sorrow, nothing of ash, nothing of iron. We linger here, in this beautiful, heavy dark. We stay with the sleeping faces of the young men in their coarse tunics, their unsent letters resting softly against their chests. We stay with the dreaming mothers and the quiet homes. We hold on to this stillness, wrapping it around us, feeling the warmth of the summer earth beneath our feet. We hold on to it because it is so incredibly precious. It is the last gentle breath of a world that is about to vanish into memory. The last moment of innocence before the sky tears open. There is no fear in this dark. There is only rest. Only the slow, steady heartbeat of thousands of souls sleeping under the stars, entirely unaware of the dawn that is waiting just beyond the horizon. Let them sleep just a little longer. Let the night stretch out its protective arms. Let the wind remain quiet, and the trees remain still. In this tiny, infinite sliver of time, everything is safe. Everything is whole. Everything is exactly as it should be. The summer night breathes in, slow and deep. And the world waits. Morning did not break that day, it shattered. It did not arrive with the gentle, creeping light of the sun, but with a sudden, unnatural trembling deep within the earth. The air, which only hours before had been heavy with the sweet scent of sleeping wildflowers, suddenly tasted of ash and turned soil. It was a waking unlike any other. There were no roosters calling out to the dawn, only a low, endless rumble that rolled across the horizon like a thunderstorm that refused to break. The golden summer, so perfectly still and innocent just a breath ago, was suddenly fractured. In the small, wooden houses that dotted the countryside, sleep was torn away. The mother who had so peacefully braided her daughter's hair the night before now stood by the window, her hand pressed flat against the cool glass. She looked out into the twilight, her eyes wide, trying to understand the strange, bruised colors painting the western sky. It did not look like morning. It looked like a wound. She did not scream. She did not panic. There was only a profound, heavy shock that settled into the very marrow of her bones. The world she knew, the world of predictable mornings and quiet evenings, was slipping through her fingers like fine, dry sand. Inside the quiet rooms, the morning routines were abandoned. The dough left to rise in the wooden bowls was forgotten. Instead, a new, hurried rhythm took over. Drawers were pulled open with trembling hands. Blankets were spread across kitchen tables, quickly filled with the simple, suddenly vital treasures of ordinary life. What do you take when you are leaving everything behind? She packed a round loaf of dark bread, wrapping it carefully in a clean, white cloth. She packed a small tin cup, a heavy woolen shawl that smelled of cedar, and a single, faded photograph of her own mother. She moved with a strange, numb efficiency, her mind unable to fully grasp the enormity of the moment. She woke her daughter with a soft touch to the shoulder, whispering that it was time to go, dressing her in the dim light with hands that tried so desperately to remain steady. Down in the village square, the air was thick with the dust of moving feet and the quiet, heavy sorrow of parting. There were no grand speeches. There was no soaring music. There was only the rustle of clothing, the shuffling of boots, and the low, muffled sounds of weeping. Young men, the same boys who had been peeling potatoes and laughing in the shade of the oak trees, now stood with their rifles, their faces pale beneath their freckles. The innocence of the previous evening had been washed away, replaced by a bewildered, silent understanding. Fathers pulled their sons into tight, desperate embraces, pressing calloused hands against young cheeks, unable to find the words to say goodbye. Wives buried their faces in the coarse wool of their husbands' tunics, breathing in the scent of them one last time, trying to memorize the exact feeling of their arms. The partings were swift, driven by the urgency of the strange, rumbling horizon. Promises were whispered into ears, fragile vows made against the rising tide of the unknown. "I will come back," they murmured. "Keep walking east. I will find you." They were words spoken entirely on faith, tiny anchors thrown into a violently churning sea. As the sun finally rose, harsh and indifferent, the great migration began. The quiet country lanes, usually reserved for a wandering cow or a slow-moving hay cart, were suddenly choked with humanity. It was a river of souls, flowing away from the setting sun. Families walked side by side, their worldly possessions piled high on creaking wooden handcarts or carried in bundles upon their backs. The dust rose from the dirt roads in thick, choking clouds, coating their clothes, their hair, and their eyelashes in a fine, gray powder. The heat of the summer, which had felt so comforting just a day ago, now pressed down upon them like a physical weight. There was no shade on the long, endless roads across the steppe. The sun beat against their shoulders, relentless and unforgiving. Yet, amidst the exhaustion and the fear, there was a quiet, profound resilience. They simply put one foot in front of the other. Left, right. Left, right. The rhythm of survival. Along this dusty ribbon of road, beautiful, unseen moments of everyday heroism bloomed like tiny flowers in the cracks of a ruined pavement. An old woman, her face lined with the maps of a long life, stood by the wooden gate of her farmhouse. She held a heavy wooden bucket filled with cool, clear water from her deep well. She did not speak as the endless line of strangers passed her by. She simply offered a tin dipper to anyone who reached out a parched hand. A tired mother, a bewildered child, a weary soldier. She poured the water, her hands trembling slightly, a silent offering of grace in a world gone mad. A few miles down the road, a young girl tripped over a stone, dropping her small cloth doll into the dirt. Before she could cry out, a stranger, a man with heavy shoulders and a soot-stained face, bent down. He picked up the doll, carefully dusted it off with his large, rough hands, and gently handed it back to her with a soft, reassuring smile. He did not know her name. He would never see her again. But in that fleeting moment, he was a protector, a guardian of a child's small comfort. These were the quiet acts of defiance against the chaos. The sharing of a single, hard biscuit. The offering of a space on a crowded wagon for a woman whose feet could no longer carry her. The gentle hand placed on a trembling shoulder. In the face of unimaginable loss, they clung to each other. They held fast to their shared humanity. For the soldiers, the young men now walking backward away from the frontier, the world had become a surreal, disorienting dream. They were retreating through the very landscapes they had spent their lives tending. They walked past fields of wheat that were ready for the scythe, past apple orchards heavy with ripening fruit, past small, whitewashed churches standing silently in the sun. It broke their hearts to leave the earth behind. The boy with the harmonica, who had played his melancholic tune into the summer night, now marched with his head down, watching the dusty boots of the man in front of him. His lips were cracked from the thirst, his shoulders aching beneath the weight of his pack. He reached a dirty hand into the breast pocket of his tunic. His fingers brushed against the folded paper. The letter. The letter he had written to the girl with the laughing eyes. He had not mailed it. There were no post offices anymore, no mail carriers riding down the quiet lanes. He kept his hand over the pocket as he walked. That small, fragile piece of paper felt like the only real thing left in the universe. It was a bridge to the boy he had been just yesterday. In his mind, he repeated the words he had written, silently reciting them like a prayer against the rhythmic crunch of gravel beneath his boots. The stars here look exactly like the stars back home. He held onto those words. He held onto the memory of her face. It gave him the strength to take the next step, and the next, and the next. The soldiers did not speak of grand strategies or the movement of armies. They spoke in hushed, tired voices about their sore feet, about the terrible, gnawing thirst, about the memories of cool rivers and shaded porches. They shared their meager rations, splitting a single cigarette 3 ways, passing it back and forth in the dust, grateful for the brief, grounding bite of the smoke. They were brothers now, bound together not by uniforms or oaths, but by the shared, heavy burden of the endless road. As the long day finally began to bleed into evening, the heat began to lift, replaced by a gentle, cooling breeze. The sun dipped below the horizon, but the western sky remained illuminated by an eerie, flickering orange glow. It was a light that brought no comfort, a silent testament to the towns and villages left behind. The endless river of people slowly ground to a halt by the sides of the road. They pulled their carts into the tall grass, laying out their blankets under the vast, darkening sky. There were no walls to protect them tonight, no roofs to shelter them from the dew. They were entirely exposed, a multitude of souls camping in the wild. Yet, as the darkness settled, a familiar, comforting quiet returned to the earth. Mothers gathered their children close, wrapping them in heavy shawls, whispering old lullabies to soothe their restless minds. The gentle, humming melodies drifted up into the night air, mingling with the soft rustle of the wind. Husbands held their wives, their arms forming small, fiercely protective sanctuaries in the open fields. The soldiers dropped their heavy packs, lying back against the cool earth, staring up at the heavens. The boy with the letter in his pocket looked up. And there they were. The stars. They were exactly the same as they had been the night before. Unchanged. Unmoved. Shining with a cold, pure light that ignored the dust and the sorrow below. He watched them twinkle, a profound wave of exhaustion washing over him. The summer was shattered. The world had tilted on its axis, and nothing would ever be the same. But as he listened to the soft breathing of the men around him and the gentle wind moving through the grass, he knew that they were still here. They were still breathing. They were still walking east. The night deepened, wrapping its dark, velvet cloak over the weary travelers. The road would be waiting for them in the morning, long and hard and dusty. But for now, under the canopy of the unchanging stars, there was rest. There was the quiet, enduring beat of the human heart, stubbornly refusing to stop. Sleep now. Close your eyes against the dust. Let the night hold you. The journey has just begun, but you are not alone. You are walking together, carrying the fragments of the world you love, stepping softly, quietly, into the dark. Winter arrived not as a season, but as a silent, heavy door closing on the world. The great city, with its elegant spires and sweeping bridges, was slowly swallowed by a profound, unbroken white. The Dnieper River, which had flowed so freely under the summer sun, began to slow. The water grew thick and dark, turning to slush before finally surrendering to the deep, biting cold. It locked into a solid sheet of ice, trapping the city in a vast, frozen embrace. The roads leading out disappeared beneath the snowdrifts. The trains ceased their rumbling. The world beyond the city limits faded into a distant, unreachable memory. The isolation was absolute. But within this circle of frost, a quiet, breathtaking resilience began to bloom in the dark. As the heavy winter settled over the grand avenues and narrow courtyards, the city grew incredibly still. The hum of electricity faded away, leaving the streets and apartments bathed in the soft, flickering shadows of candlelight. The grand chandeliers hung silent and dark. The radiators, once warm to the touch, turned to blocks of cold iron. The cold was no longer just the weather outside the window. It became a quiet, uninvited guest that moved into the hallways, crept under the heavy woolen blankets, and settled deep into the bones. To step inside one of these darkened apartments was to enter a sanctuary of fragile, stubborn life. Entire families gathered into a single, small room, pulling their beds close together to share the warmth of their breath. In the center of the room stood a tiny, makeshift iron stove, its metal chimney snaking out through a crack in the frosted window pane. These little stoves were the beating hearts of the frozen city. People fed them with whatever they could find. A broken wooden chair. A collection of old, dry pine cones gathered before the snows fell. Even beloved books, their pages turning to fragile, glowing ash to provide just a few precious moments of heat. Imagine a grandmother sitting as close to the little iron stove as she dares, her shoulders wrapped in 3 layers of knitted shawls. The soft, orange glow of the dying embers illuminates her face, highlighting the deep, gentle lines around her eyes. Beside her, a young boy leans his head against her knee, his eyes heavy with a tired, quiet kind of sleep. She hums softly to him, a melody that barely disturbs the silent air, gently stroking his hair with fingers tucked into thick woolen mittens. There is no panic in this room. There is only a deep, enduring patience. A quiet determination to simply outlast the dark. In this frozen world, time was no longer measured by clocks. It was measured by the slow, careful division of a single, tiny piece of bread. This bread was not the soft, golden loaf of the summer. It was dark, heavy, and coarse, mixed with sawdust and whatever else could be found to make it stretch just a little bit further. It was a square so small it could rest entirely in the palm of your hand. Yet, it was the most sacred, precious thing in the world. Watch the father as he sits at the small wooden table, the precious ration sitting on a clean, white plate before him. The entire room holds its breath. He takes a small knife, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the immense weight of the responsibility. He presses the blade down with absolute precision, dividing the tiny square into even smaller slivers. He cuts a piece for his wife, a piece for his child, a piece for his mother. When he cuts the bread, a few microscopic crumbs fall onto the white porcelain. He does not ignore them. With a damp fingertip, he carefully presses down on each individual crumb, lifting it from the plate and placing it gently upon his tongue. Nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. When he hands the sliver of bread to his wife, she looks at it, and then looks at him. "I am not so hungry today," she whispers, her voice soft and dry. She tries to push the bread back toward his hand. It is a gentle, beautiful lie. A lie told entirely out of love. He shakes his head, closing her fingers over the bread. They share a look in the dim light, a silent conversation of shared burden and unwavering devotion. These were the grandest victories of the siege. Not battles fought with steel, but battles fought with tiny pieces of dark bread, where the human heart refused to surrender its compassion to the cold. When the snow stopped falling and the pale winter sun cast a thin, watery light over the city, a new, slow journey began. The pipes beneath the streets had long since frozen solid. To find water, one had to walk to the ice of the Neva. The streets were eerily quiet, the sound of footsteps muffled by the thick layer of packed snow. People moved like shadows, wrapped in layers of coats, scarves wrapped around their faces until only their eyes were visible. They pulled small wooden sleds behind them, carrying empty tin buckets and kettles. They walked slowly, carefully, their felt boots finding purchase on the slippery ground. Down at the riverbank, a hole had been chopped through the thick, green-white ice. A small, silent congregation gathered around it. There was no pushing, no shoving. Only a profound, shared understanding of the effort it took just to stand there. A woman in a dark coat kneels by the edge of the dark, freezing water. Her hands are numb, her breath pluming in the air like pale smoke. As she lowers her bucket, her foot slips on the wet ice. Instantly, two strangers reach out, their gloved hands catching her arms, steadying her. They do not say a word. They simply pull her back from the edge, wait for her to find her balance, and help her lift the heavy, sloshing bucket from the dark water. She nods her head in a silent thank you, her eyes crinkling at the corners. In the shadow of the great, frozen monuments, this small, unspoken solidarity is the only monument that truly matters. The walk back is agonizingly slow. Every step is measured. To spill even a drop of the water is a heartbreak. The water sloshes softly against the sides of the tin bucket, a quiet, rhythmic sound that marks the slow passage of survival. When they finally reach their rooms, the water is heated over the dying embers of the little stoves, turning into a weak, hot tea that brings feeling back to frozen fingers and warms the hollows of tired chests. And in the deepest, darkest hours of the night, when the cold presses hardest against the frosted glass, the city turns to the quiet comfort of the mind. In a corner of a freezing room, a young woman sits wrapped in a quilt. She holds a small, leather-bound diary in her lap. The ink in her bottle has frozen solid, so she holds it tightly in her hands, breathing hot air onto the glass, willing it to melt just enough to write. When the ink finally yields, she dips her pen and begins to form careful, elegant letters on the page. She does not write about the hunger or the bitter wind. She writes about the memory of a spring rain. She writes about a poem she read once, about the soft green buds of the birch trees. She writes a letter to a friend she hasn't seen in months, pretending that they will meet for tea in the afternoon. She writes to remind herself that she is a human being, with a mind, a soul, and a heart that still knows how to dream. Across the city, in a grand, freezing library with boarded-up windows, an old man stands before a small, huddled group of neighbors. He is reading aloud from a worn, heavy book by the light of a single candle. His voice is weak, but it carries a quiet, steady rhythm. He reads a story of ancient sailors crossing a starlit sea. The people listen, their eyes closed, letting the words carry them far away from the ice, far away from the dark. For an hour, they are not trapped in a freezing city. They are sailing on warm winds. They are safe. This is how they held the line. Not with walls of stone or gates of iron, but with poetry. With shared warmth. With the gentle touch of a hand on a shoulder. With the quiet dignity of brushing the dust from a coat, even when there is nowhere to go. They held onto their humanity with a fierce, whispering grip, refusing to let the frost reach their souls. Outside, the wind howls down the empty avenues, blowing fine, dry snow across the ice of the Neva. The city is a fortress of white and gray, silent under the vast, glittering canopy of the winter stars. The cold is immense, ancient, and indifferent. But inside the dark rooms, beneath the heavy blankets, the hearts continue to beat. Slow. Steady. Defiant. They breathe in the frozen air. They exhale a quiet hope. They close their eyes, holding tight to the memories of the golden summer, holding tight to the hands of those they love. Rest now. The night is long, and the ice is deep. But the embers in the stove are still glowing, soft and warm in the dark. You are together. You are safe in this quiet moment. Let the wind blow outside the window. Let the frost trace its delicate ferns upon the glass. Just breathe. Slowly. Deeply. And wait for the morning light. There is a moment in late autumn when the earth breathes a heavy sigh, and the mud begins to harden into iron. It is the time of year when the last golden leaves have finally surrendered to the wind, leaving the birch trees standing bare and quiet against a pale, slate-gray sky. The air grows sharp, carrying the faint, metallic scent of the coming snow, a silent promise of the deep winter that is waiting just beyond the horizon. Here, in the vast, open fields that stretch out like a heavy blanket around the great city, the world has been reduced to the simple colors of survival, the dark brown of the turned soil, the charcoal gray of the heavy clouds, and the soft, fading light of the afternoon sun. If you were to walk out into these fields, you would not find an army of soldiers. You would find the city itself, breathing, moving, and working in the damp chill. They are the ordinary keepers of the everyday world. They are school teachers with soft hands, who only weeks ago were turning the fragile pages of poetry books. They are bakers, whose coats still carry the faint, ghostly dusting of flour. They are mothers, librarians, grandmothers, and university students. They are draped in heavy, dark coats, their heads wrapped tight in thick woolen shawls of deep reds and muted blues, pulled low to shield their faces from the biting wind. They have come out of their warm kitchens and their quiet living rooms, stepping away from the comforting glow of their hearths, to draw a line in the earth. Listen to the sounds of the field. It is not the chaotic noise of a battlefield. It is a slow, methodical rhythm, like the steady, laboring heartbeat of a giant. It is the dull, heavy thud of metal striking the damp earth. The wet, sucking sound of the mud as a spade is pulled free. The scrape of a wooden handle against a thick woolen mitten. It is the sound of 100,000 people, moving together in a quiet, synchronized dance of pure, exhausting devotion. They are digging a trench. A vast, deep scar in the earth, meant to catch the heavy machines of the enemy, meant to swallow the advancing storm. But to the women and men standing in the mud, it is not just a trench. It is a shield, forged from dirt and sweat, built to protect the very soul of their world. The work is impossibly hard. The autumn rains have turned the fields into a thick, clinging mire. The mud is heavy, grabbing at their boots, pulling them down, making every single step a monumental effort. It cakes on the blades of their shovels, turning the simple act of lifting the dirt into a profound test of endurance. Watch the woman standing near the edge of the deep embankment. She is a musician. Her fingers, which have spent a lifetime dancing effortlessly across the ivory keys of a piano, are now wrapped in torn strips of cloth to protect them from the rough, splintering wood of the shovel handle. Her back aches with a deep, throbbing fire. Her shoulders feel as though they are made of lead. She pushes the blade of the shovel into the heavy, wet clay, stepping on the metal edge to force it down. She lifts the earth. She throws it to the side. She takes a breath. She does it again. She does not think of the grand sweep of history. She thinks of her small apartment on a quiet street. She thinks of the potted geranium resting on her windowsill, waiting to be watered. She thinks of the worn velvet armchair where her father used to sit and read the evening paper. She is digging to protect that armchair. She is lifting the heavy earth to keep the glass in that window from shattering. Every shovelful of mud is a silent, stubborn declaration of love for the gentle, ordinary life she left behind that morning. Beside her works an older man, a retired watchmaker with spectacles that keep fogging over in the cold air. He moves slower than the others, his breath coming in shallow, white plumes. He stops for a moment, leaning his weight against the long handle of his pickaxe. He reaches into the deep pocket of his coat and pulls out a small, slightly crushed tin of hard candies. He carefully opens it, his cold fingers fumbling slightly, and offers it to the musician. They do not speak. The wind is too cold, and their breath is too precious. She nods, a small, tired smile touching the corners of her eyes, and takes a cherry-flavored drop. She places it on her tongue, letting the sweet, bright flavor bloom in her mouth. It is a tiny, perfect luxury. In the midst of the freezing mud and the endless labor, that small taste of sweetness feels like a miracle. It is a reminder that beauty still exists, hiding in the deep pockets of an old woolen coat. As the afternoon slowly bleeds away, the shadows begin to stretch across the uneven ground. The sky turns a deep, bruised purple, and the temperature begins to drop in earnest. The wet mud on their boots begins to freeze, turning into heavy, solid blocks of ice. The earth itself resists them, the clay growing hard and unyielding. But as the light fades, they pause. They wipe the sweat from their brows with the backs of their woolen mittens, and they turn around to look behind them. There, rising in the distance, bathed in the soft, hazy twilight, is the city. Moscow. It looks like a dream rising out of the mist. The great onion domes catch the last, pale rays of the dying sun, glimmering faintly against the darkening sky. The silhouettes of the tall, elegant buildings stand quiet and still. From this distance, they cannot see the sandbags in the windows or the tape crisscrossing the glass. They only see the shape of their home. They see the smoke rising lazily from 1,000 chimneys, a sign of fires being lit, of kettles being put on the stove, of children being gathered close for the evening. Looking at the city, a profound, quiet strength seems to wash over the exhausted diggers. The ache in their backs recedes, just a little. The cold wind feels a little less sharp. They are standing between the darkness and the light. They are the human wall keeping the night at bay. The sight of those distant, smoking chimneys fills their tired hearts with a fierce, protective warmth. They grip their shovels a little tighter. They turn back to the freezing earth. And then, the snow begins to fall. It does not arrive in a fury. It comes gently, hesitantly at first. Tiny, delicate flakes drifting down from the charcoal sky, caught in the slow, sweeping currents of the wind. They land on the dark wool of the women's shawls, resting like tiny stars before melting into the fabric. They land on the tips of the bare birch branches. They land gently on the turned, heavy mud, beginning to cover the dark scars of the earth in a clean, forgiving white. The snow brings a sudden, magical hush to the world. The sounds of the digging are muffled, softened by the falling flakes. The harsh edges of the landscape are smoothed away. It is as if the sky itself is lowering a soft, protective blanket over the tired workers. They welcome the snow. It is cold, yes, but it is clean. It washes away the heavy, suffocating grip of the autumn mud. As the flakes catch on her eyelashes, the musician stops again, lifting her face to the sky. She closes her eyes, feeling the gentle, cold kisses of the snow against her warm cheeks. For a brief, floating moment, she is simply a woman standing in a beautiful, silent winter snowfall. The exhaustion melts away, leaving only a quiet, peaceful stillness in her chest. Somewhere down the long, winding line of the trench, a thermos is opened. The faint, sweet smell of hot black tea and dried apples drifts through the frosty air. The small metal cup is passed from hand to hand, carefully, reverently. Each person takes only a small sip, just enough to feel the wonderful, radiant heat bloom in the center of their chest before passing it to their neighbor. It is a communion of survival, a shared warmth passed from stranger to stranger in the gathering dark. One of the women, a young mother with tired, kind eyes, pulls a small piece of folded paper from her coat as she waits for the tea. It is a letter from her husband, far away in a place she cannot pronounce. She does not need to read the words, she has memorized them down to the very curves of the ink. She holds the paper gently between her thick mittens, just to feel it. Just to know it is there. I am safe, the letter says. Keep your feet warm. I will see you when the snow melts. She presses the letter briefly to her lips, a silent kiss sent out into the winter wind, before tucking it safely away, close to her heart. Night finally arrives, deep and complete. The digging stops. The spades are driven into the earth one last time, left standing like silent sentinels in the snow. The people begin the long, slow walk back toward the city, or toward the dim, glowing canvas tents set up at the edge of the woods. They walk in single file along the narrow paths they have carved, their heads bowed against the falling snow. Their bodies are completely spent. Their muscles tremble with a deep, hollow fatigue. They are so tired that they feel as though they might simply float away into the dark. But as they walk, there is a quiet, unspoken peace among them. They have given everything they had to the earth today. They have left their strength in the freezing mud, and in return, they have built a fortress. Look back at the empty trenches, slowly filling with the gentle snow. They are quiet now. The wind whispers softly through the wooden handles of the abandoned shovels. The earth is asleep, resting under its new, white blanket. The city in the distance is safe for another night. The fires are burning in the hearths. The children are asleep in their beds. And the ordinary men and women, the quiet heroes of the frozen mud, finally close their heavy eyes. Rest your hands now. The work is done for today. Let the snow fall outside your window, soft and deep. Let the quiet darkness hold you. You are warm. You are safe. The shadows have passed, and the world is beautifully, perfectly still. Just breathe the cool, clean air, and let the gentle night carry you to sleep. There is a cold so deep it stops being a season and becomes a living, breathing presence in the dark. It is the heart of the winter night, a time when the world feels as though it has been carved entirely from ice and shadows. The forests that surround the capital stand completely still, frozen under a vast, endless sky scattered with hard, glittering stars. The pine trees bow deeply under the weight of the heavy snow, their branches curving toward the earth like tired shoulders. Every single pine needle is encased in a delicate, crystalline shell of frost. When the wind moves through the woods, it does not rustle, it chimes, a soft, fragile sound like thousands of tiny glass bells whispering in the dark. The snow is not merely falling, it has conquered the earth. It lies in massive, rolling drifts that transform the jagged, broken landscape into a smooth, silent ocean of white. It swallows sound. It swallows the harsh edges of the world. It creates a heavy, velvet hush that presses gently against the ears, isolating every heartbeat, every footstep, every single breath. If you were to look out across these endless, frozen fields, at first, you would see nothing but the unbroken white. You would think the world was entirely empty, swept clean by the howling blizzards that had raged for days. But then, the shadows begin to move. Slowly, quietly, out of the deep woods and the shallow ravines, figures begin to emerge. They do not look like soldiers. They look like ghosts, spirits born directly from the blizzard itself. They are draped in anything white they could find, bedsheets pulled from abandoned homes, torn parachutes, heavy winter coats smeared with chalk and lime. They blend so perfectly into the landscape that if they were to stand still for even a moment, they would vanish entirely back into the snow. They walk in a single, winding line, carving a narrow trench through the waist-deep drifts. The snow is so thick that it takes a monumental, exhausting effort simply to lift a heavy felt boot and push it forward into the unbroken powder. It is a slow, rhythmic, agonizing dance. Lift, push, sink. Lift, push, sink. The only sound in the immense silence of the forest is the soft, rhythmic crunch of the snow beneath their feet and the steady, collective sound of their breathing. In the bitter cold, their breaths hang in the air like pale, floating feathers. White breaths in the dark. Each exhalation is a tiny, defiant cloud of warmth in a universe of ice. You can see the rhythm of their life in those small clouds, rising and fading, rising and fading. The frost gathers on the wool of their collars, on the edges of their scarves, weaving itself into their eyelashes and their eyebrows until their faces are framed in delicate white lace. Look closely at the hands holding the heavy wooden stocks of their rifles. They are wrapped in coarse mittens, sometimes 2 or 3 pairs layered over one another, yet the cold still finds its way through the wool. Their fingers are entirely numb, heavy and stiff, aching with a dull, distant throb. The metal of their weapons is so freezing that to touch it with bare skin would tear the flesh away. Yet, they hold onto them with a quiet, stubborn grip. They hold onto them because, in this vast, freezing emptiness, it is the only thing that tethers them to their purpose. They do not speak. The air is too sharp in their lungs, and their energy is too precious to waste on words. But there is a profound, silent conversation happening in the dark between these moving shadows. It is the language of shared endurance. When the man at the front of the line becomes too exhausted to break the trail, he simply steps to the side, sinking deep into the powder, and lets the next man take his place. He falls to the back of the line, stepping into the already flattened footprints, resting his weary legs in the path carved by his brothers. It is a continuous, revolving circle of sacrifice and support. They carry each other forward through the storm, not with their arms, but with the quiet offering of their strength. One of these ghostly figures is a young schoolteacher. He walks with his head bowed against the biting wind, his eyes fixed firmly on the heels of the man in front of him. His mind is not on the vast, freezing fields, nor is it on the terrifying mechanics of the war. To survive this cold, the mind must retreat to a place of absolute warmth. He is thinking of a small, cast-iron stove in a classroom far away. He is thinking of the smell of chalk dust and the bright, damp wool of children's coats hanging by the door. He imagines the exact sound of a piece of dry birch wood catching fire, the sudden, cheerful crackle, the bright orange light dancing across the wooden floorboards. He holds that memory so tightly in his mind that he can almost feel the radiant heat against his numb cheeks. It is a tiny, private fire burning quietly inside his chest, keeping his heart beating, keeping his feet moving through the endless dark. Deep in the pocket of his coat, beneath the heavy layers of frozen wool, rests a letter. It is folded into a small, tight square, the paper softened by the constant touch of his thumb. It is from his mother. She wrote about the heavy snow in their village, about how the neighbor's dog had finally had her puppies, and how she was saving a jar of sweet plum jam for the day he returned. He knows every word by heart. He does not need to read it, he just needs to know it is there. That small piece of paper is his anchor. It is the reason he pushes his heavy boot into the snow, over and over again. And then, something changes in the night. For months, these men and women have known only the bitter, heartbreaking rhythm of the retreat. They have known only the feeling of stepping backward, of leaving pieces of their world behind, of watching the horizon shrink day by day. Their bodies have been tuned to the weary, sorrowful frequency of withdrawal. But tonight, the wind is blowing at their backs. The step they take tonight is not backward. It is forward. It is the quietest, most monumental shift in the world. There are no bugles sounding the charge. There are no grand declarations echoing across the ice. There is only the collective, silent turning of a tide. The slow, heavy realization that the retreat has ended. They are stepping into the deep snow, moving away from the capital they have bled to protect, and they are pushing the darkness back. It begins as a feeling before it becomes a thought. A strange, unfamiliar sensation welling up in the hollows of their exhausted chests. It is not the fiery, soaring triumph of a victory. They are too tired for triumph. It is something much smaller, much more fragile, and infinitely more beautiful. It is hope. It is a faint, glowing ember waking up beneath a mountain of ash. As they walk through the silent, frozen birch forests, pushing deeper into the unknown night, that tiny spark begins to warm the blood in their veins. The man next to the schoolteacher stumbles. His foot catches on a hidden, frozen root beneath the snow, and he pitches forward, falling heavily into the deep powder. The line comes to a gentle, silent halt. The schoolteacher kneels down in the snow beside him. He does not shout. He simply reaches out his clumsy, heavily mittened hand and grasps the thick wool of the fallen man's coat. With a slow, groaning heave, he pulls his friend back to his feet. They stand close together for a moment, the snow swirling gently around them, their white breaths mingling in the freezing air. The fallen man reaches into his coat and retrieves a tiny, precious object. A single, hard lump of sugar. He breaks it perfectly in half with his freezing fingers and presses one of the halves into the schoolteacher's mitten. They place the sugar on their tongues. It is hard, cold, and incredibly sweet. In the center of the dark, freezing wilderness, it is a taste of grace. A small, silent promise that they are still human, still capable of giving, still capable of caring for one another when everything else has been stripped away. They share a brief, weary nod, their eyes crinkling behind their frosted lashes. Then, they turn back to the unbroken snow, and step forward together. As the hours stretch on, the deep, velvet black of the night begins to thin. The edge of the horizon, far off to the east, begins to turn a pale, delicate shade of indigo. The stars slowly fade, blinking out one by one as the quiet dawn approaches. The light reveals the vastness of the snowfields, the beautiful, terrible emptiness of the world they are crossing. But it also reveals the path they have made. A long, continuous line of deep footprints stretching back through the forest, a testament to their endurance, a map of their quiet defiance. They are still so incredibly cold. They are still overwhelmingly, heartbreakingly tired. The war is not over, and the winter will not yield its grip for many long, dark months. But the air feels different this morning. The wind has lost a fraction of its cruel edge. As the first, pale rays of the winter sun break across the horizon, they hit the ice-encrusted branches of the pine trees, turning the entire forest into a glittering, radiant cathedral of light. The frost sparkles like millions of scattered diamonds, a breathtaking beauty born from the freezing dark. The schoolteacher squints against the sudden brilliance. He takes a deep breath of the sharp, clean air, letting it fill his lungs. He feels the small square of the letter resting against his chest. He feels the lingering sweetness of the sugar on his tongue. He feels the solid, reassuring presence of the men walking beside him, their shoulders moving in unison, a silent brotherhood bound by the frost. They are moving forward. They are walking into the light. The fragile spark in his chest glows a little brighter, a little steadier. It is enough to keep his hands holding the heavy rifle. It is enough to keep his feet pushing through the snow. It is enough to believe, just for today, that the winter will eventually end. That the snow will melt, the earth will soften, and the long road will finally lead them all back home. Let the image of the white snow soothe your mind. Let the rhythm of their slow, steady footsteps lull you into rest. The hardest part of the night has passed. The ghosts have turned into men again, walking quietly into the morning sun. Close your eyes. Feel the warmth returning to your hands, the gentle peace settling over your heart. The world is vast, the journey is long, but the dawn has finally broken. Rest now, in the quiet, hopeful light of the winter morning. Just breathe. Slowly. Deeply. And let the stillness carry you to sleep. There is a gentle, weeping sound when the earth finally begins to remember the sun. It starts as a single, trembling drop of water falling from the very tip of a frosted pine needle, landing softly on the snow below. Then, another drop. And another. Soon, the entire forest is filled with the quiet, rhythmic tapping of the thaw. The deep, terrifying winter, which had felt so absolute and eternal, is slowly losing its grip. The ice on the branches begins to thin, turning fragile and transparent, before sliding away to reveal the dark, damp bark underneath. The air loses its bitter, biting edge, replaced by a strange, heavy softness. It is the smell of wet soil, of ancient roots drinking in the melting frost, of a world slowly, painfully waking up. But the spring does not arrive with a sudden, joyful burst of green. It comes slowly, pulling back the heavy white blanket to reveal the hidden scars of the land. As the snow recedes, it uncovers the forgotten fragments of the winter's struggle. A dropped mitten, its wool stiff and frozen. The shattered wood of a ruined cart. The scorched earth that the blizzards had so mercifully hidden away. The landscape is bruised, raw, and exhausted. And then comes the mud. The earth, saturated by months of deep snow, turns into a vast, unyielding ocean of thick, dark clay. The roads vanish beneath it. The fields become impassable swamps. The mud clings to the soldiers' heavy boots like iron weights, pulling them down, making every single step a labor of profound effort. It is a messy, clinging, exhausting reality. Yet, this endless sea of mud brings a strange, unexpected gift. It brings a pause. The great machines cannot move in the heavy clay. The supply carts are stuck fast in the ruts. The terrible momentum of the war simply grinds to a halt, caught in the deep, sucking embrace of the damp earth. For the first time in many long, dark months, an eerie, fragile quiet settles over the front lines. The roaring falls silent, replaced by the gentle chorus of dripping water and the soft, squelching sound of boots navigating the puddles. In this sudden lull, the soldiers emerge from their damp bunkers and dugouts, blinking against the unaccustomed brightness of the daylight. They look like men waking from a very long, very dark dream. They carry their heavy winter coats in their arms, their tunics unbuttoned at the collar to let the cool spring breeze touch their skin. Watch a group of them sitting on a row of empty wooden supply crates, their backs resting against the sun-warmed logs of a ruined barn. They close their eyes, tilting their pale, tired faces upward, simply drinking in the sunlight. They sit in absolute silence for a long time, letting the golden warmth soak into their chilled bones. It is a feeling of pure, profound grace. To simply be warm. To simply sit in the sun without trembling. One of them, a man with deep lines etched around his gentle eyes, slowly reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, dented tin comb. He begins to carefully comb his hair, a simple, ordinary gesture of dignity reclaimed from the freezing dark. But with this quiet, comes the space to think. And with thought, comes the aching, heavy tide of longing. During the desperate, freezing nights of the winter, there was no time to remember. Survival demanded every ounce of their focus. But now, sitting in the warm spring sun, listening to the distant, high-pitched call of a flock of returning geese, the memories come flooding back. They remember the smell of their mothers' kitchens. They remember the soft, powdery feel of their children's hands. They remember the exact shade of blue in their wives' eyes. The camps become places of quiet reflection. All along the muddy trench lines, men sit with their knees drawn up to their chests, using their battered helmets or pieces of dry wood as makeshift desks. They are writing letters. A young boy, barely out of his teenage years, sits cross-legged on a piece of dry canvas. He holds a stubby, worn pencil, pressing it carefully onto a piece of thin, wrinkled paper. He licks the tip of the pencil to make the graphite dark enough to read. He wants his writing to be neat. He wants to look brave. He writes to his parents, far away in a village that has already seen the snows melt. He writes about the birds he saw that morning. He tells them about a stray dog that has wandered into their camp, a scruffy little terrier they have named Comrade, who sleeps by the cook stove and begs for scraps of dark bread. He writes that he is eating well, that his boots are keeping the water out, and that his friends are looking after him. He weaves a gentle, comforting story upon the page. He fills it with the mundane, beautiful details of life. But beneath the carefully formed letters, beneath the stories of the stray dog and the returning geese, there is a profound, unspoken weight. He does not write about his fear. He looks out across the muddy fields, watching the water pool in the deep tracks left by the winter. He knows, just as every man sitting in the sun knows, that this spring is an illusion. It is a melting, fragile dream of peace. They know that this warm sun, the very sun they are so grateful for, is slowly drying the earth. And when the mud hardens, when the roads become firm once more, the pause will end. The unknown summer lies ahead, vast and terrifying, waiting just beyond the horizon of the drying fields. This is the silent anxiety of the thaw. To long for the warmth, but to dread the dry ground it brings. He pauses, his pencil hovering over the paper. He looks down at his hands. They are stained with dirt, calloused and rough. He takes a deep, slow breath, steadying the slight tremble in his fingers. He forces a smile, even though no one is looking, and presses the pencil back to the page. "Do not worry for me," he writes, his handwriting large and clear. "The sun is shining today, and I am thinking of the apple trees in the back garden. Tell my little sister I will bring her a ribbon when I come home." He folds the paper carefully, smoothing the edges with his thumb. In doing so, he is wrapping up all of his anxiety, all of his dread for the coming summer, and burying it deep within his own heart. He will carry that heavy burden himself, so that his mother, reading this letter in her quiet kitchen, might smile and sleep peacefully for just one more night. It is an act of quiet, towering heroism. The heroism of protecting those you love from the shadows you must face alone. Further down the line, an older soldier is finishing his own letter. He is a quiet man, a carpenter before the world broke apart. As he folds his piece of paper, he notices something small and white out of the corner of his eye. There, pushing stubbornly through the thick, dark mud at the base of a ruined wall, is a single snowdrop flower. It is impossibly fragile. Its tiny white petals droop slightly, holding a single bead of dew. It seems like a miracle that such a delicate thing could survive the crushing weight of the winter, let alone bloom in the middle of this scarred, muddy wasteland. The carpenter kneels down in the dirt. He reaches out with his large, rough hands, moving with exquisite care. He gently plucks the tiny flower from its stem. He opens his folded letter, places the snowdrop carefully in the center of the page, and folds the paper back over it, pressing it flat. He will send this tiny, fragile piece of spring to his wife. A silent message that beauty still exists. That life, no matter how deeply it is buried, will always find a way to push through the dark earth and reach for the light. As the afternoon slowly shifts into evening, the golden light turns soft and hazy, catching the moisture in the air and turning the muddy landscape into a painting of muted blues and gentle purples. The air begins to cool, a gentle reminder that the winter has only retreated, not vanished. The soldiers begin to gather their heavy coats, walking slowly back to their shelters. The letters are handed to the mail carriers, hundreds of small, folded hopes placed into heavy canvas sacks. They will travel across the drying roads, across the vast rivers, carrying the love, the gentle lies, and the quiet courage of the men waiting in the mud. The camp falls quiet once again. The fires are lit, sending thin, blue ribbons of smoke rising into the twilight sky. The stray dog curls up by the warmth of the embers, resting his head on his paws. The soldiers lie in their bunks, listening to the endless, rhythmic dripping of the melting snow outside. It is a soothing, constant lullaby. Drip, drip, drip. Let the sound of the falling water wash away the worries of the day. Do not think of the drying roads. Do not think of the summer that is waiting. In this moment, In this gentle, muddy pause, the world is quiet. The sun has warmed the earth, and the letters are on their way home. You are safe in this quiet space between the seasons. Let the heavy, soft air of the spring night wrap around you. Breathe in the scent of the damp earth and the melting pine. The world is resting, and you can rest too. Just close your eyes, listen to the gentle weeping of the thaw, and let the peaceful dark carry you away. There is a heat so vast it seems to swallow the very sky. It is the height of summer on the great, endless steppe. The world here is not measured in miles or fields, but in horizons that stretch out so far they blur into a trembling haze. The spring mud has long since baked into a hard, cracked crust, and the tall, wild grasses have turned the color of pale gold, dry and rustling in the hot wind. Above, the sun is not just a light, it is a heavy, physical weight pressing down upon the shoulders of the earth. The sky is an immense dome of bleached, cloudless blue, so bright that you must narrow your eyes just to look at it. Across this vast, shimmering plain, a river of dust is moving. It is a slow, quiet river, made not of water, but of weary, exhausted men. They are walking east, their backs to the setting sun, moving steadily toward the distant, unseen waters of the Volga. This is the great summer retreat. A journey born of necessity, measured in heavy, dragging footsteps and the rhythmic, hypnotic crunch of boots upon the dry, sun-baked clay. To look at these men is to see the earth itself in human form. The dust of the steppe has risen up to claim them, coating their tunics, their heavy packs, and the brims of their caps in a fine, powdery gray. It settles into the deep lines around their eyes, frosts their eyelashes, and paints their skin with the pale, chalky colors of the road. They look like statues carved from the dry clay, moving with a slow, mechanical determination. The air around them vibrates with the lazy, electric hum of cicadas, a sound so constant it simply becomes part of the silence. There is no talking in the ranks. The air is far too hot, and the mouth is far too dry for words. In this endless, searing heat, the mind reduces the entire universe down to a single, overpowering desire. Water. It becomes a beautiful, aching dream. As they walk, their heads bowed against the glare, they do not dream of grand feasts or soft beds. They dream of the dark, cool water of a deep forest well. They dream of the sound of a fast-moving stream tumbling over smooth, mossy stones. They imagine the profound, simple grace of lifting a tin cup to their cracked lips and feeling the sweet, cold rush of water washing away the dust. Watch the young soldier walking near the edge of the road. His face is flushed, his shoulders slumped beneath the heavy canvas straps of his pack. His tongue feels like a piece of dry felt. Hanging from his belt is a small metal canteen. It is warm to the touch, heated by the relentless sun. He unclips it with clumsy, tired fingers and unscrews the cap. He tilts it gently, just enough to feel the water touch his lips. He does not gulp. He does not drain it. He allows just a tiny, precious mouthful to roll across his tongue, holding it there, savoring the wetness before letting it slide down his parched throat. He lowers the canteen. There is perhaps only one more swallow left inside. He looks to his left. Beside him walks an older man, a baker from a northern town who has not complained once during the hundreds of miles they have walked. The older man's eyes are fixed on the horizon, his breathing shallow and dry. The young soldier does not say a word. He simply reaches out and presses the warm metal of the canteen into the baker's dusty hand. The baker looks down at the canteen, then up at the young man. A silent, profound understanding passes between them. It is the sharing of life itself. The baker nods, a gesture so small it is almost invisible, and raises the canteen. He takes the final sip, leaving the metal empty, but his heart full. In the middle of the burning, desolate steppe, this quiet offering of water is a monument of human kindness. It is a reminder that even when everything else is stripped away, the capacity for grace remains entirely intact. As the long day stretches on, the road winds through small, quiet villages that seem to rise organically from the earth. Whitewashed cottages with thick thatched roofs sit behind low wooden fences, their gardens heavy with sunflowers whose bright yellow heads droop in the afternoon heat. These are the hardest moments of the march. The physical exhaustion is terrible, but the emotional weight of passing through these homes is a sorrow that settles deep into the marrow of their bones. They are leaving the land behind. With every step they take toward the east, they are surrendering these quiet, beautiful places to the approaching storm. The villagers stand by their wooden gates, watching the endless, dusty column move past. They are mostly old men with withered faces, women with dark scarves tied beneath their chins, and small children who cling to their mothers' aprons. There is no panic in their eyes, only a deep, echoing sadness. They know what the retreat means. They know that tomorrow, or the day after, the strangers will arrive. Yet, there is no anger directed at the retreating soldiers. Only a tender, breaking maternal love. An old woman steps out from the shadow of a broad cherry tree. She carries a heavy wooden bucket, the water inside sloshing gently against the sides. In her other hand, she holds a battered tin dipper. She walks to the edge of the road, right to the line of passing men. She does not ask what unit they belong to. She does not ask where they are going. She simply dips the tin cup into the cool water and holds it out. A weary soldier stops, his hands trembling as he takes the cup. He drinks deeply, the water spilling down his chin, washing pale tracks through the dust on his neck. When he hands it back, he tries to whisper a thank you, but his voice is entirely gone. The old woman reaches out and gently touches his dusty cheek with her cool, wet hand. "Go with God, my son," she murmurs, her voice as soft as the rustling grass. "Keep walking. We will wait for you to come back." She fills the cup again. And again. She stands in the brutal heat until the bucket is completely empty, offering her quiet blessing to men she has never met, men who look exactly like the sons she has sent away into the dark. For the soldiers, leaving her standing by the empty bucket is a heartbreak they must swallow in silence. They carry her face with them, adding her to the invisible, heavy burden of memories they must protect. They keep walking, fueled by the promise they made in their hearts, that one day, they will turn around. One day, they will walk back down this exact road and fill her bucket once more. To survive the sheer monotony and pain of the march, the mind learns to drift. It detaches from the aching muscles and the blistered feet, floating away into the sanctuary of memory. One soldier closes his eyes for long stretches as he walks, letting the man in front of him guide his path. Behind his closed eyelids, he is not on the burning steppe. He is walking through a cool, damp birch forest just after a summer rain. He can smell the rich, dark soil and the sharp, clean scent of the wet leaves. He can feel the cool mist on his face. He builds the memory piece by piece, focusing on the vivid green of the ferns, the soft moss beneath his bare feet, the gentle, rhythmic dripping of water from the high canopy. He lives inside this cool, shadowed dream for hours. It is his shield against the sun. It is his private, secret oasis. By holding onto the memory of the shade, he finds the strength to endure the light. Finally, as the afternoon begins to bleed away, the cruel grip of the sun begins to loosen. The light shifts from a blinding white to a thick, liquid gold, pouring over the tall grass and casting long, soothing shadows across the plains. The sun becomes a massive, glowing ember sinking toward the edge of the world. As it touches the horizon, the sky explodes in a breathtaking tapestry of bruised purples, deep oranges, and soft, dusty pinks. With the setting of the sun comes the most magnificent feeling in the world, the evening breeze. It sweeps across the vast openness of the steppe, carrying the scent of dry earth and sweet wild sage. It touches the sweat-soaked backs of the soldiers, cooling their skin, lifting the oppressive weight from the air. The relief is so profound, so absolute, that it feels like a physical embrace. The marching column finally slows, and then comes to a quiet halt. There are no tents to pitch, no shelters to build. The steppe is their bed tonight. They shrug off their heavy packs, letting them fall to the dirt with a dull thud. They do not even bother to unroll their blankets. They simply sink down onto the earth, lying flat on their backs in the tall, dry grass. The ground is still wonderfully warm, holding the gathered heat of the day. It radiates upward, a gentle, soothing warmth that seeps into their aching muscles and their tired bones. It is the embrace of the homeland, holding them close, offering them rest. As the twilight deepens into night, the vast, unbroken dome of the sky fills with an impossible number of stars. Out here, far from any city, the Milky Way looks like a luminous river of diamond dust poured across the blackness. The sheer scale of the sky is comforting. It reminds them that the world is so much larger than the road, so much older than the war. The camp is entirely silent. There are no fires tonight. There is only the soft sound of thousands of men breathing in unison, a slow, rhythmic tide of rest washing over the plains. The young soldier lies with his head resting on his canvas pack. He feels the cool night air on his face, a beautiful contrast to the warm earth beneath his shoulders. His thirst has been quenched, his weary legs are finally still, and his heart is steady. He looks up at the endless sea of stars, feeling incredibly small, yet incredibly safe in the vastness of the night. The dust of the day has settled. The long march is paused. Let the heavy weariness drain from your own limbs. Feel the soothing, quiet warmth of the earth supporting you, holding you completely safe. The air is cool and still, and the beautiful, silent stars are keeping watch over the world. There is nothing more you need to do today. Just rest. Let the soft breeze of the night carry you away, deep into a gentle, dreamless sleep. There is a peculiar, heavy silence that settles over a city when it forgets how to be a city. It is no longer a place of ringing tram bells, of hurried footsteps on cobblestones, or of neighbors calling out to one another across narrow balconies. The grand avenues and the quiet, tree-lined streets have been transformed into a strange, jagged landscape of ash and bone. The buildings, once tall and proud, now stand like hollow shells, their roofs open to the pale, indifferent sky. The air is thick with a fine, gray powder, the pulverized memory of bricks, mortar, and everyday life that drifts down endlessly, coating the world in a soft, monochromatic snow. The great, sweeping expanses of the open steppe are gone. The horizon has shrunk. The world has contracted, pulling tight until it is no wider than a single, ruined street, no deeper than the hallway of a shattered apartment building. If you were to walk quietly through this labyrinth of shadows, stepping carefully over the fallen stones, you would find yourself at the threshold of what used to be a grand residence. The heavy wooden front doors are gone, replaced by a jagged opening that leads into the dim, dusty belly of the building. Let us go inside. We move slowly up the grand staircase, where the marble steps are buried under layers of crushed plaster and broken glass. We reach the third floor and step into an apartment that, not so long ago, held a family. The walls are still covered in a delicate, fading wallpaper of climbing yellow roses, though it peels away in long, dry strips like autumn leaves. In the corner of the living room, miraculously untouched by the collapse of the ceiling, sits a small, round dining table. A single porcelain teacup rests upon it, coated in gray dust, a fragile ghost of a peaceful morning left forever unfinished. And here, sitting in the deep shadows beneath the window frame, are the new residents of this room. They are a small squad of young men, though their faces have been aged by the heavy, clinging dust. They sit with their backs pressed against the peeling wallpaper, their long legs stretched out across the debris-covered floorboards. They are so perfectly still, so deeply covered in the ash of the city, that they look like statues carved directly from the rubble. In this claustrophobic, shattered world, the bond between these men has shifted into something profound and absolute. They are no longer just friends, and they are no longer just soldiers. They are a single, breathing organism. They know the exact rhythm of each other's breathing. They know the precise, subtle shift in a shoulder that means one of them is too cold, or the quiet, heavy sigh that means one of them is sinking too deeply into a dark memory. They communicate in a language composed entirely of slight nods, tired smiles, and the gentle touch of a hand against a dusty sleeve. Listen to the absolute stillness of the room. The enemy is not miles away across a vast field. They are in the building directly across the street. Sometimes, they are even in the very same building, separated only by a ceiling or a ruined wall. It is a terrifying, surreal intimacy. In the quiet hours of the night, you can hear them. You can hear the scrape of a boot on a floorboard above you. You can hear a muted cough, or the quiet murmur of a foreign language drifting through the broken plumbing pipes. The men sit in the dark, listening to the ghosts that share their walls. They do not shout. They do not make sudden movements. They live in a perpetual, breathless whisper, moving through the apartment with the slow, deliberate grace of shadows. One of the men, a former mechanic with hands that were once stained with black oil but are now painted in gray ash, shifts slightly against the wall. He reaches into the deep breast pocket of his heavy tunic. His movements are agonizingly slow, deliberately quiet. His squad mates turn their heads, their eyes tracking his hand. He pulls out a small, crumpled piece of newspaper and a tiny pinch of dark, dry tobacco. It is perhaps the greatest treasure in the entire ruined city. The other men lean in, their movements synchronized, drawn by a gravity stronger than the earth. They form a tight, intimate circle, their heads bowed together, creating a small, protective dome with their shoulders. The mechanic carefully, painstakingly rolls the tobacco into the fragile paper, his thick fingers moving with the delicate precision of a watchmaker. He licks the edge of the paper, sealing it, and places the thin, crooked cigarette between his dry lips. Another man, a young student who still carries a volume of poetry in his pack, produces a single wooden match. He cups his hands tightly together, creating a dark cave of flesh to hide the flame from the open window. He strikes the match. For a brief, beautiful second, the tiny, warm orange light illuminates their faces. You can see the exhaustion carved deeply into their features, the dark circles beneath their eyes, the thick layer of dust clinging to their unshaven cheeks. But you can also see the profound, unwavering love they hold for one another. It is a love forged in the crucible of the ruined city, a brotherhood so fierce and quiet it defies all explanation. The mechanic leans in, touching the tip of the cigarette to the hidden flame. He takes a slow, deep breath, pulling the smoke into his lungs. He holds it there for a long moment, closing his eyes, letting the harsh, biting comfort of the tobacco settle his trembling nerves. He opens his eyes and passes the cigarette to the student. The student takes it with reverent, soot-stained fingers. He places it to his lips and breathes in. They do not speak. They simply pass the glowing ember around the small circle, each man taking exactly one drag, sharing the warmth, sharing the brief, intoxicating illusion of peace. It is a communion of ash and smoke, a sacred ritual performed in the heart of a fallen world. When the cigarette is nothing but a tiny, burning speck, the mechanic carefully pinches it out, saving the last fragment of unburned tobacco for another day. The circle widens as the men lean back against the peeling wallpaper, their chests rising and falling in slow, synchronized rhythms. As they sit in the deepening twilight, the student reaches out and begins to sift his fingers absent-mindedly through the rubble beside him. His hand brushes against something smooth. He gently pulls it free from the crushed plaster. It is a small, wooden toy. A little painted horse, its red mane chipped and faded by time and dust. He holds it up in the dim light, turning it slowly in his hand. The other men watch him, their eyes soft and quiet. The student traces the curve of the wooden horse with his thumb. He thinks of the child who must have played with this toy on this very floorboards. He imagines the sound of small feet running across the room, the sound of a mother's voice calling from the kitchen. He does not feel anger. He only feels a deep, aching tenderness. He carefully wipes the gray dust from the little wooden horse using the edge of his sleeve. He places it gently on the windowsill, standing it upright, looking out over the ruined street. It is a tiny, beautiful act of restoration. A quiet, stubborn refusal to let the darkness claim every single piece of the world. By placing the toy on the sill, he is making a promise to the unseen child. "We are holding this room for you," he whispers in his heart. "We are sitting in the dust so that one day, the dust will settle. We are holding this line so that one day, someone might sweep this floor, and a family might sit at this table once again." This is the quiet heroism of the city of ash and bone. It is not found in grand, sweeping charges or deafening noise. It is found in a small squad of tired men, sitting shoulder to shoulder in a ruined apartment, sharing a single cigarette and rescuing a wooden toy from the rubble. As the sun finally sets, the ruined city is bathed in the cold, silver light of the moon. The jagged silhouettes of the broken buildings look like a quiet, petrified forest. The dust suspended in the air catches the moonlight, glowing softly, turning the air itself into a delicate, luminous mist. Inside the apartment with the yellow roses, the men prepare for the night. They do not have beds. They simply pull their heavy coats tightly around their shoulders and lean against one another. The mechanic rests his heavy head against the shoulder of the student. The student leans back against the wall, closing his eyes. They sleep in shifts, always listening, always waiting. But in these quiet hours, as the moon travels across the open ceiling, they find a fragile, precious rest. They are surrounded by the shattered remains of a city, wrapped in the cold embrace of the stones, but they are kept warm by the simple, enduring presence of each other. Let the heavy dust settle now. Let the quiet darkness fill the room. There is nothing to fear in the stillness. You are surrounded by the quiet, steady breathing of those who watch over you. You are entirely safe in this forgotten room. Lean your head back against the wall, feel the comforting warmth of the shoulder beside you, and let the gentle, silver light of the moon guide you into a deep, peaceful sleep. The sky did not fall all at once, it drifted down in tiny, starlit flakes until the world was entirely locked in white. Winter has returned to the great river. It did not arrive with the gentle, creeping frost of the autumn, but with a sudden, overwhelming breath that froze the earth mid-sentence. The wide, dark waters of the Volga have slowed, groaning under the immense weight of the cold, before finally surrendering and turning to solid, unmoving ice. Over the shattered, broken bones of the city, the snow falls in a thick, heavy curtain, covering the soot, covering the ash, covering the endless scars of the long and terrible autumn. The jagged edges of the ruined apartment buildings are softened by deep drifts of white. The craters in the streets are filled, turning the ruined avenues into smooth, pale valleys. It is a beautiful, terrible blanket that the sky has lowered over the earth, muffling the world in a profound, velvet quiet. But this winter brings something more than just the snow. It brings a change so vast, so monumental, that it can be felt in the very marrow of the bones. Out on the vast, open steppe, far beyond the city's crumbling edges, a great ring has been drawn. It was not drawn with ink on a map, nor with grand declarations. It was drawn in the dark, with the heavy, exhausted footsteps of thousands of ordinary men and women. They marched through the blinding blizzards, moving like phantoms across the endless white plains, their shoulders hunched against the howling wind. They walked until they met in the frozen wilderness behind the city, linking their hands, linking their lines, linking their very lives together. They have drawn a circle of frost around the storm. The massive army that had crossed the burning summer plains, the iron tide that had broken the world apart, is now caught inside a cage of ice. With the closing of this circle, a strange, surreal quiet begins to settle over the front. For months, the air has been shattered by the endless, deafening roar of artillery, the frantic clatter of iron, the terrifying noise of a world tearing itself apart. But now, as the snow deepens and the cold tightens its grip, the great machines of war begin to freeze. The engines refuse to turn. The metal becomes so brittle it seems it might shatter at a touch. The roaring slowly, hesitantly, begins to fade. It is replaced by an eerie, breathless stillness. It is the chilling, profound silence of a trapped city. Stand on the high ridge overlooking the ruined valley, standing with the men who now form the edge of this vast, white circle. They look down into the basin, toward the ghostly, snow-covered skeletons of the factories and the houses. They know what is trapped inside. They know the desperation that is quietly unfolding in those freezing cellars. But among these sentries, standing in the biting wind, there is no gloating. There is no loud, triumphant cheering. They are far too tired for joy. What they feel is something much deeper, much heavier. It is the slow, dawning realization of a miracle. Watch a young soldier standing in a shallow trench carved out of the snow. He is wrapped in a thick sheepskin coat, his collar pulled up so high that only his dark, gentle eyes are visible beneath his fur cap. His breath plumes into the night air in a steady, silver rhythm. He leans his heavy, mittened hands on the frozen edge of the trench, looking out across the expanse of the pocket. He remembers the summer. He remembers the terrible, burning dust of the retreat, the thirst that cracked his lips, the sorrow of the women who offered him water from wooden buckets as he walked away. He remembers feeling as though the entire earth was shrinking beneath his feet. But tonight, he has not taken a single step backward. He is holding the line. He is the wall. He looks up at the vast canopy of winter stars, sparkling with a harsh, diamond-like clarity in the freezing atmosphere. A quiet, profound relief washes over his tired heart. The tide has turned. The terrible, unstoppable momentum of the dark has broken against the frozen shores of the Volga. He does not know how long the winter will last, or how many days of cold remain, but he knows, with an absolute, quiet certainty, that the hunters are now the surrounded. Down the trench line, a few of his comrades have huddled together beneath a stretched piece of canvas, shielding a tiny, precious fire from the wind. They are heating a tin kettle, the water gathered from the clean, untouched snowdrifts behind their positions. The soft crackle of the dry birch twigs sounds like a whispered secret in the immense quiet of the steppe. One of the men, an older sergeant with a thick, frost-covered mustache, carefully pours the hot water into a chipped enamel mug. He drops a single, dried raspberry leaf into the water, a tiny fragment of the summer, saved in his pocket for months. He wraps his numb, thick fingers around the warm metal of the mug, closing his eyes as the radiant heat seeps into his skin. He passes the mug to the man beside him. The wind has changed, the sergeant whispers, his voice barely louder than the falling snow. The other man nods slowly, taking a small, reverent sip of the pale, hot water. "It is quiet tonight," he replies. It is a simple exchange, yet it holds the weight of the entire world. They sit in the flickering orange light of the embers, sharing the warmth of the cup, sharing the profound, silent understanding that they have survived the worst of the nightmare. They have caught the fire in a ring of ice, and now, they simply have to wait. Behind the lines, hidden in a deep dugout carved into the side of a frozen ravine, a young nurse sits beside a row of sleeping wounded. The dugout is lit by a single kerosene lamp, casting long, swaying shadows against the earthen walls. For the first time in what feels like a lifetime, no new stretchers are being carried through the heavy wooden door. The artillery shells are not shaking the dirt from the ceiling. The wounded men are sleeping deeply, their chests rising and falling in peaceful, rhythmic breaths. They are exhausted, broken by the autumn, but tonight, they are not crying out in their sleep. The silence of the night is a medicine more powerful than anything she carries in her canvas bag. She sits at a small, makeshift table made from an empty ammunition crate. She holds a pencil, writing a letter by the dim, golden light of the lamp. She does not write about the encirclement, or the grand movements of the lines. She writes about the faces of the men sleeping around her. "My dearest mother," she writes, her handwriting flowing smoothly across the paper. "The snow is falling so heavily today, it looks just like the winters back home. I stepped outside this evening, and the world was so completely still. You could hear the frost forming on the branches. The guns are sleeping tonight. For the first time, we are not looking over our shoulders. We have drawn a circle in the snow, and we are holding it tight. Tell little Ivan that the long night is finally breaking. I can feel the morning coming, even in the dark. She stops writing, resting her chin in her hand, letting the profound peace of the dugout wash over her. She listens to the quiet, steady breathing of the sleeping men. Every breath is a victory. Every heartbeat is a quiet, stubborn defiance of the cold outside. In the heart of the trapped city, the realization of the circle brings a chilling, final despair to those caught inside. But for the men and women standing on the frozen rim, the quiet of the night is a gentle, soothing balm. It is the permission to finally take a deep breath. The frost creeps over the edges of the trench, leaving delicate, fern-like patterns on the cold iron of the abandoned machinery. The moon rises over the steppe, casting a pale, silver glow over the endless ocean of white. It illuminates the millions of footprints that form the Great Ring, a testament to the endurance of the human spirit. They are cold. They are incredibly, heartbreakingly tired. But they are together, standing shoulder to shoulder in the dark, watching the snow bury the ashes of the past. Let the image of the falling snow calm your mind. Let the deep, unbroken silence of the winter night wrap around you like a heavy, protective blanket. The line is held. The storm has been contained. You do not need to carry the weight of the world tonight. You are safe within the circle. Listen to the soft, rhythmic breathing of the men in the dark. Listen to the gentle whisper of the wind as it sweeps across the frozen plains. The turning point has been reached, and the long road back begins in the quiet peace of this very moment. Rest your head, close your eyes, and let the gentle, soothing cold of the winter lull you into a deep and dreamless sleep. There is a silence so profound that it rings in the ears like a single, clear bell. For months without end, the sky above the great river had been made entirely of thunder. The earth had shuddered and broken, the air itself heavy with the constant, terrifying roar of a world tearing itself apart. The mind had grown so accustomed to the noise that it had simply become the weather, a violent storm that seemed as though it would never, ever pass. But today, the storm has broken. The thunder has finally rolled away across the vast, frozen steppe, leaving behind a stillness so absolute, so heavy, that it feels almost like a dream. It is a strange, breathless quiet. The guns have stopped. The terrible, grinding engines have fallen completely still. Over the ruined, shattered skeleton of the city, a soft, pale winter sun has broken through the heavy clouds, casting long, gentle shadows across the endless fields of white snow. Deep beneath the rubble, in the dark, damp cellars and the reinforced basements, the survivors are sitting in the dark. They have lived like shadows for so long, huddled close together, speaking only in hushed, hurried whispers. But now, as the absolute silence presses against the heavy iron doors and the sandbagged windows, they slowly begin to lift their heads. Watch a young soldier, his face smeared with soot and his heavy woolen coat stiff with the winter frost. He sits on a wooden ammunition crate, his hands resting gently on his knees. He listens to the quiet. He tilts his head, waiting for the familiar, terrifying whistle from the sky, waiting for the trembling in the floorboards. But nothing comes. There is only the soft, rhythmic sound of water dripping from a melting icicle near the doorway. Drip. 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 Slowly, hesitantly, he stands up. He walks toward the narrow staircase leading up to the street. He pushes open the heavy, splintered wooden door, the hinges groaning loudly in the hushed air. He steps out from the dark earth, blinking against the sudden, brilliant glare of the winter light. And then, he does something he has not done in over 100 days. He stands up straight. It is a monumental, breathtaking sensation. He does not crouch. He does not hug the walls or scan the high, broken windows for movement. He simply stands to his full height, rolling his aching shoulders back, lifting his chin, and letting the cool, clean winter wind wash over his face. The physical relief is so intense that his knees tremble slightly. The immense, crushing weight of constant fear has been lifted from his chest, leaving behind a vast, hollow space filled only with the crisp winter air. He looks up at the sky. It is a brilliant, fragile blue, entirely empty, entirely peaceful. He takes a long, deep breath, pulling the cold air deep into his lungs, savoring the simple, miraculous taste of survival. Around him, the city is beginning to wake from its long, terrible nightmare. From out of the ruins, from the deep craters and the shattered factory halls, other figures are slowly emerging. They are draped in white camouflage, heavy furs, and tattered blankets. They look like ghosts walking through a petrified forest. They wander out into the open streets, their footsteps crunching softly in the deep, undisturbed snow. They are not cheering. There are no grand, sweeping parades of triumph. The victory here is far too heavy, far too costly for loud celebration. Instead, there is an eerie, exhausted stillness. It is the profound, numbing relief of simply being alive when the morning comes. They walk past the twisted, frozen shapes of destroyed tanks, which now look like nothing more than strange, sleeping beetles covered in white frost. They walk past the hollowed-out apartment buildings, where the snow has gently filled the empty windows, softening the harsh, broken edges of the brick. The city of ash and bone has been transformed by the winter into a quiet, frozen monument, blanketed in a pure, forgiving white. Down by the banks of the wide Volga, the great river lies completely frozen, locked under a thick, green-white sheet of ice. For months, this river was the only lifeline, a perilous crossing of dark, freezing water. Now, it is as still as glass. A small group of soldiers gathers on the ice near the shoreline. They do not hide in the shadows of the bank. They stand openly in the bright sunlight. One of them, a man with a thick, frost-covered beard, uses the butt of his rifle to break a small hole in the surface of the ice. He dips a battered tin kettle into the dark, rushing water beneath. They build a small fire right there on the open ice, using pieces of splintered wood gathered from the ruined docks. They do not try to conceal the flame. They let the bright orange fire burn proudly, watching the thin ribbon of white smoke rise straight up into the clear blue sky. They huddle around the warmth, extending their numb, mittened hands toward the heat. When the water boils, they pass the kettle around, just as they have done 1,000 times before. But today, the tea tastes different. It tastes like tomorrow. They look at one another in the bright daylight. They see the deep lines carved into their faces, the gray dust permanently settled into their skin, the profound exhaustion in their eyes. But they also see the gentle, undeniable spark of life. A young man, his arm resting in a makeshift sling made from a torn piece of canvas, looks across the fire at the bearded soldier and offers a small, quiet smile. It is not a smile of joy, but of a deep, shared understanding. "We made it," the smile says. "The world ended, but we are still here." In a quiet corner of what used to be a grand library, a young medic sits on a fallen stone pillar. The roof above her is entirely gone, opening the room to the vast canopy of the sky. The floor is covered in a thick layer of snow and torn, frozen pages. She rests a small, leather-bound notebook on her knee. She holds a pencil in her gloved hand, her fingers clumsy and stiff from the cold. She is writing a letter to her family, far away in a quiet village where the war is only a voice on the radio. She stares at the blank page for a long time. How do you explain the absolute silence that follows the end of the world? How do you describe the feeling of waking up and knowing that you do not have to be afraid today? She slowly presses the lead to the paper. "My dearest ones," she writes, her handwriting large and slightly uneven. "The guns have gone to sleep. I am sitting in the sun, and I can hear the wind moving through the stones. I wanted to write to you to say that I am warm. I am safe. The long night is over, and I am finally coming back to you." She folds the paper, closing her eyes as a single, warm tear slips down her cold cheek, cutting a clean path through the soot on her face. It is a tear of pure, overwhelming release. She does not wipe it away. She simply lets it fall, a tiny drop of sorrow and relief returning to the earth. Across the snowy expanse of the ruined city, another procession is taking place. Long, slow lines of men are walking out of the cellars and the ruined factories, moving toward the vast, open plains of the steppe. They are wearing uniforms of field gray, though they are now little more than rags, wrapped in stolen blankets and layers of torn canvas. They are the men who had once crossed the burning summer plains as a conqueror's tide. Now, they are entirely broken by the cold, the hunger, and the relentless defense of the city. They walk with their heads bowed, their shoulders slumped, their feet dragging heavily through the deep snow. As they pass the Soviet soldiers standing quietly by the side of the road, there is no shouting. There is no anger left. The sheer scale of the suffering has burned away all the fury, leaving only a profound, hollow recognition of human fragility. The victors and the defeated are bound together by the same terrible, freezing exhaustion. They are all simply men who have survived a nightmare, staring at one another across the immense, silent tragedy of the winter snow. An older Soviet soldier, smoking a small, rolled cigarette, watches the gray column shuffle past. He sees a young prisoner stumble and fall to his knees in the snow, too weak to stand. The older soldier does not raise his weapon. He does not turn away. He simply exhales a long, slow breath of smoke, feeling a deep, quiet sorrow for the mothers who will never see these boys return. He steps forward, reaches out a thick, mittened hand, and gently helps the fallen man back to his feet. It is a quiet gesture, a fleeting moment of grace in a world that has seen so much cruelty. The prisoner nods weakly, pulling his thin blanket tighter around his shoulders, and continues his slow, agonizing walk into the white horizon. As the short winter day begins to fade, the pale sun sinks below the edge of the ruined city. The sky turns a beautiful, bruised shade of violet, and the first bright stars begin to prick through the gathering twilight. The silence deepens, settling over the Volga like a heavy, velvet quilt. The city of Stalingrad is finally allowed to sleep. The fires in the open streets burn down to soft, glowing embers, casting a gentle, orange warmth against the snow. The survivors curl up in their heavy coats, resting their heads on their packs. But tonight, they do not sleep with one eye open. They do not listen for the sound of falling earth. They close their eyes completely, entirely surrendering to the profound, healing peace of the night. They have held the line. They have endured the unendurable. And now, the earth itself seems to hold them, cradling their exhausted bodies in a quiet, freezing embrace. Let the silence of the city wash over you. Feel the incredible, weightless relief of the storm finally passing. You have crossed the dark river. You have walked through the ash and the snow, and you have emerged into the quiet, peaceful twilight. There is nothing more you need to carry. The heavy burdens of the day can be laid down here, in the soft, untouched snow. Listen to the gentle, steady whisper of the wind as it travels across the wide, frozen Volga. Listen to the slow, rhythmic beating of your own heart, safe and calm in the quiet dark. Close your eyes. Let the deep, soothing stillness hold you. The nightmare is over, the morning will be bright, and you can finally, truly, rest. There is a heaviness to the summer air when the earth is holding its breath. It is the absolute height of the season on the great, rolling plains, a time when the world should only be concerned with the slow, golden ripening of the wheat. The sky above is a vast, flawless dome of brilliant, aching blue, so bright and clear it seems to stretch on into infinity. Beneath it, the endless fields are an ocean of tall, rustling grass and heavy-headed sunflowers, turning their bright, open faces toward the light. The heat is thick and sweet, carrying the scent of warm dust, wild thyme, and the rich, dark fragrance of the fertile soil. If you were to close your eyes and simply listen, you would hear the gentle, hypnotic hum of the summer. The lazy drone of honeybees moving from blossom to blossom. The dry, rhythmic chirping of grasshoppers hidden deep in the stalks. The soft, sweeping whisper of the warm wind brushing across the tops of the golden wheat, moving in slow, rippling waves that look exactly like the surface of a calm sea. But this summer is different. Hidden beneath the gentle beauty of the swaying grass, the earth has been carved, hollowed, and fortified. Miles upon miles of deep, winding trenches cut through the soft loam, weaving a complex, invisible web beneath the roots of the flowers. And in these deep, earthen corridors, thousands of men are waiting. It is a wait so agonizing, so stretched and taut, that it feels as though time itself has simply forgotten to move forward. They have been sitting in the shadows of the trenches for days, watching the sun drag itself slowly across the sky, watching the shadows lengthen and fade, waiting for a storm that has not yet broken. The silence is profound, but it is not peaceful. It is the heavy, loaded silence of a pendulum pulled all the way back, trembling just a fraction of a second before it is released. Down in the cool, dark earth, a young soldier sits with his back pressed against the chalky wall of the trench. His helmet rests on his knees, and his hands are folded quietly in his lap. He looks up at the narrow ribbon of blue sky visible between the edges of the trench. A single, small white cloud drifts lazily across his view. He watches it with an intense, childlike fascination. He focuses on the soft, entirely harmless shape of it, letting his mind float up out of the dirt, out of the fear, to drift alongside it in the quiet air. Beside him, an older man is meticulously cleaning a pair of spectacles with the edge of his tunic. He breathes softly on the glass, rubbing it in slow, measured circles. It is a tiny, grounding routine. In a world that feels as though it is about to shatter, the simple act of polishing a piece of glass, of making something clear and clean, is a quiet anchor for the wandering mind. They speak to one another, but only in the softest, most fragile murmurs. Nervous whispers that barely rise above the sound of the wind in the grass above. "Do you think it will rain tonight?" the younger boy asks, his voice trembling slightly, as thin as a dry reed. "No, little brother," the older man replies, slipping the wire frames over his ears. "The sky is too clear. The stars will be bright tonight. Try to close your eyes. Just for a moment." He reaches out and places a gentle, calloused hand on the boy's shoulder. It is a touch that speaks 1,000 words of comfort. It says, "I am here. We are together. You do not have to carry this heavy weighting all by yourself." The boy leans slightly into the warmth of the older man's hand, closing his eyes, letting the steady rhythm of his friend's breathing calm the frantic beating of his own heart. A few miles away, hidden deep within a sunken grove of ancient oak trees, the true weight of the coming storm is waiting in the shadows. Here, resting in deep, camouflaged pits, are the great steel machines. They are massive, imposing beasts of iron, their long, heavy barrels resting silently on the edges of the dirt. They are draped in nets and woven branches, blending into the dappled shade of the forest, silent and still. Inside the dark, claustrophobic belly of one of these machines sits a young mechanic. The space is incredibly tight, built only for the grim geometry of war, not for the comfort of the human body. The air inside the cabin is incredibly hot, baking under the summer sun that beats down on the steel roof. It smells profoundly of thick black oil, hot grease, and the sharp, metallic tang of cold iron. But beneath those heavy, industrial scents, there is another smell. It is the faint, unmistakable scent of fear. It is the sour, heavy sweat of men who know they are sitting inside a metal tomb, waiting for the sky to fall. The mechanic leans his head back against the cold, hard wall of the hull. His hands, stained permanently black with grease, rest in his lap. Between his dirty fingers, he holds a small, remarkably clean piece of pale blue ribbon. It belonged to his wife. She had tied it around a small bundle of letters she had given him on the day he left for the front. Long after the letters had been read, reread, and folded until the paper was soft as cloth, he kept the ribbon. He brings it slowly to his face, closing his eyes, and breathes in. Through the overpowering stench of the diesel and the hot steel, he can just barely catch the ghost of her perfume. A faint, powdery scent of dried lilacs and clean soap. It is a tiny, impossible piece of home, entirely out of place inside the iron machine. He presses the ribbon to his lips, whispering her name into the dark. It is a quiet, desperate prayer, a beautiful, stubborn flame of love burning brightly in the center of the cold machinery. He reaches out and pats the heavy steel of the interior wall, exactly as one might soothe a restless, frightening horse. "Be good to us today," he whispers to the machine. "Just keep us safe." Back in the infantry trenches, the mail has arrived. It is a surreal, beautiful moment of normalcy injected into the heart of the tension. A weary mail carrier, his canvas bag heavy with paper, crawls through the low communication trenches, handing out the small, folded squares. A young farm boy, his face dotted with pale freckles, takes a letter with shaking hands. He does not open it immediately. He simply holds it. He rubs his thumb over the dark ink of his mother's handwriting, tracing the familiar curves and loops. He can almost hear her voice in the way she shapes her letters. He carefully unfolds it, reading the words in the golden afternoon light. She writes about the harvest, about how tall the corn has grown, about how the old barn cat has finally caught the mouse in the feed room. It is a letter entirely full of life, of simple, enduring things. As he reads, a tiny ladybug lands on the edge of the paper. It is a brilliant, enameled red, with delicate black spots. It pauses on the paper, testing the air with its tiny antennae, before slowly crawling across his mother's words. The boy watches it, utterly mesmerized. In the midst of all this terrible waiting, in the shadow of the greatest clash of armor the world has ever known, this tiny, fragile creature is simply going about its day. It does not know about the trenches. It does not know about the steel machines hidden in the woods. It only knows the sun, and the paper, and the summer wind. He smiles, a true, genuine smile that reaches all the way to his tired eyes. He gently lowers the letter to the floor of the trench, allowing the ladybug to step off the paper and onto a blade of grass. He watches it climb higher, higher, until it finally opens its hidden wings and takes flight, vanishing into the blue sky. And then, the waiting ends. It does not begin with a sound, but with a feeling. A deep, heavy vibration that starts in the very core of the earth and travels upward, through the soles of their boots, through the bones in their legs, until it settles deep in their chests. The dirt walls of the trench begin to tremble. Tiny rivers of loose, dry sand cascade down the chalky sides. The water in their tin canteens begins to ripple and dance. The men look at one another. The letters are quickly folded and tucked away against their hearts. The spectacles are secured. The deep, heavy silence of the summer afternoon is finally broken. From the horizon comes a sound so vast, so incredibly immense, that it defies human comprehension. It is not an explosion. It is a continuous, deafening roar that swallows the entire earth. It sounds as though the sky itself is tearing apart, as though the mountains are grinding together. It is the sound of thousands of steel monsters waking from their slumber, throwing their terrible weight against one another in a storm of fire and iron. The ground pitches and rolls like a ship caught in a violent sea. The clear blue sky is instantly erased, swallowed by a massive, rolling wall of thick black smoke and choking brown dust. The sun is blotted out, turning the bright summer day into a dark, terrifying twilight. In the trenches, the men press themselves flat against the trembling earth. They pull their helmets low, burying their faces in the dirt. They do not look up at the storm. To look up is to invite madness. Instead, they turn inward. They turn to each other. The older man with the spectacles reaches out blindly in the dark, choking dust, finding the shoulder of the younger boy. He grips it tightly, anchoring the boy to the earth, anchoring him to reality. They press their foreheads together against the dirt wall, closing their eyes, breathing in the smell of the soil. Inside the iron beasts, the heat becomes unbearable, the noise of physical force that batters against the eardrums. The young mechanic grips his levers, his knuckles white, the small blue ribbon safely tucked beneath his heavy tunic. He is entirely consumed by the roaring dark, moving the machine forward into the blinding dust, surrounded by the terrifying, deafening clang of steel striking steel. Yet, even in the absolute center of this unimaginable storm, the human heart refuses to be silenced. As the earth shakes, the young boy in the trench does not think of the enemy. He does not think of the iron. He thinks of the ladybug taking flight. He thinks of his mother's handwriting. He feels the strong, comforting grip of the older man on his shoulder. They hold onto the earth, and they hold onto one another. They endure the deafening roar by retreating deep into the quiet, sacred sanctuaries of their own memories. They build fortresses of love, of gentle summer days, and of quiet promises, and they hide within them while the steel storm rages above their heads. The clash of armor is a terrible, awe-inspiring fury, a collision of metal and fire that scars the earth forever. But beneath the treads, beneath the smoke and the ruin, the soft, fragile pulse of humanity continues to beat. Stubborn, resilient, unbreakable. Let the roar of the storm fade away into the distance. Let the ground beneath you stop its trembling. The heavy dust is finally beginning to settle, drifting down like soft, dark snow to cover the wounded fields. You are safe in the deep earth. The storm has passed over you, and the strong walls of the trench have held. Feel the solid, reassuring weight of the ground supporting you. Listen to the slow, calming rhythm of the breathing beside you. The wait is over. The terrifying noise is gone, leaving only the quiet, soothing hush of endurance. Close your eyes, let go of the tension in your shoulders, and let the gentle, enduring peace of the quiet earth carry you down into a deep, uninterrupted rest. There is a deep, ancient sorrow in the sound of a wide river moving in the dark. It is the heart of the autumn, and the air has grown crisp and thin, carrying the damp, earthen scent of fallen leaves and cold mist. After months of walking through the dust of the endless steppe, after surviving the roaring storms of steel and the blinding light of the summer plains, the long, weary columns of men have finally reached the water. Before them lies the Dnieper. It is a river so vast, so incredibly wide, that in the shadows of the night, it does not look like a river at all. It looks like an ocean of black ink, a great, silent chasm that has opened up to swallow the world. The far bank is completely invisible, swallowed by the heavy, weeping fog that rolls across the surface of the water. There are no grand bridges waiting for them. The steel and stone arches that once spanned these waters have long since fallen, their broken spines resting quietly in the muddy depths. There are no great ships or sturdy wooden ferries. There is only the dark, freezing water, and the quiet, stubborn courage of the men who know they must cross it. On the eastern bank, hidden among the tall, rustling reeds and the damp willow trees, a silent and desperate kind of work is taking place. Thousands of men are gathered in the dark, moving like phantoms in the mist. There are no shouted orders. There is no clatter of heavy machinery. Every movement is a whisper. They are building their passage across the dark water using whatever the broken world has left them. Watch a small group of soldiers working by the edge of the muddy bank. They are kneeling in the wet clay, their hands numb from the biting chill of the autumn night. They have found a heavy, wooden door, blown from the hinges of a ruined farmhouse miles away. To this door, they are lashing empty wooden barrels and bundles of dry, hollow reeds, binding them tightly with frayed ropes and torn strips of canvas. It is a profoundly humble vessel. A fragile, makeshift raft of splinters and hope, meant to carry human lives across a terrifying expanse of freezing water. One of the men tying the knots is a young baker from a landlocked town in the east. He has never learned to swim. To him, the black water lapping gently against the muddy bank is the most terrifying thing he has ever seen. His hands are shaking so badly that he can barely pull the thick rope taut. Beside him kneels an older man, a fisherman from a northern village who has spent his entire life reading the moods of the water. The fisherman sees the young baker trembling. He does not offer hollow words of bravery. He simply reaches out, his large, rough hands covering the boy's shaking, freezing fingers. He gently takes the rope from him, finishing the knot with a practiced, steady grace. The water is just water, little brother, the fisherman whispers, his voice as soft and steady as the rustling willow leaves. It will hold us. I will sit right beside you. Just keep your eyes on my shoulder. The baker nods, swallowing hard, drawing a profound, stabilizing comfort from the quiet strength of the older man. It is a tiny, beautiful moment of grace on the edge of the void. They are bound together not by the thin, frayed ropes of their raft, but by the deep, unspoken tether of human compassion. Before they step into the water, there is a moment of collective, breathless pause. Men stand by their fragile rafts, looking out into the impenetrable fog. In this quiet, trembling space between the solid earth and the dark river, they send their thoughts backward. They close their eyes and think of the warm, brightly lit kitchens they left behind. They think of the unsent letters tucked into their breast pockets, the ink already beginning to run from the damp air. They build a mental fortress of the faces they love, a warm, glowing ember to carry with them into the freezing dark. And then, the quiet crossing begins. They push the heavy wooden doors and the bundled reeds out into the shallows. The water is brutally cold. It seeps instantly through the leather of their boots, a shocking, icy embrace that steals the breath from their lungs. They climb onto the unstable rafts, their bodies pressed tightly together to keep the wood balanced. They push away from the eastern bank. The earth falls away, and they are surrendered entirely to the river. The silence on the water is absolute and terrifying. They do not have oars. They paddle with the flat stocks of their rifles, with splintered fence boards, and sometimes, simply with their bare, freezing hands. The only sound in the entire world is the gentle, rhythmic dipping of wood into water. Splash. 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 It sounds like the river itself is weeping. As they move deeper into the channel, the thick fog closes in behind them, swallowing the shore they just left. They are suspended in a void of gray mist and black water. The current here is heavy and strong, a slow, muscular force that pulls at their fragile raft, threatening to spin them into the dark. The baker sits with his knees pulled tightly to his chest, the freezing water washing over his boots. He is entirely paralyzed by the vast, open emptiness. But the fisherman is true to his word. He sits pressed against the boy's side, radiating a steady, solid warmth. As they paddle, the fisherman hums a very low, almost inaudible melody. It is an old, slow work song from his village, a song meant to keep time with the pulling of fishing nets. The gentle, rhythmic vibration of the song transfers through the fisherman's chest and into the baker's shoulder. It is a lifeline in the dark. The boy focuses all of his attention on that low humming, letting it drown out the terrifying rush of the deep water beneath them. He breathes when the fisherman breathes. He finds his courage in the quiet, steady heartbeat of the man beside him. The physical toll of the crossing is agonizing. Their arms burn with exhaustion from fighting the heavy current. Their wet clothes freeze against their skin in the biting autumn wind. Every single yard gained is a monumental victory of sheer, stubborn willpower. They are floating on a piece of ruined wood, carrying the unimaginable weight of a war upon their tired shoulders, yet they move with the quiet, careful grace of men holding a sleeping child. They do not dare to cough. They do not dare to speak. They simply pull, and pull, and pull, trusting that the dark water must eventually end. Time loses all meaning in the fog. It feels as though they have been drifting in this cold, gray purgatory for a lifetime. But then, the deep, heavy rhythm of the current begins to change. The water grows sluggish. The thick, rolling fog suddenly parts, just for a moment, revealing the dark, looming silhouette of a high, wooded bluff. The western bank. The bottom of the makeshift raft scrapes against a hidden sandbar with a soft, dull thud. It is the most beautiful sound they have ever heard. The men slip over the side of the door, their feet sinking into the soft, freezing mud of the shallows. They do not care about the cold anymore. They wade through the thigh-deep water, their breath coming in ragged, exhausted gasps, pulling the raft behind them until it rests entirely on the solid earth. When they finally drag themselves out of the water and collapse onto the wet clay of the shore, a profound, overwhelming wave of emotion washes over them. It is a bittersweet, heavy joy. The young baker falls to his knees in the mud. He is shaking violently from the cold, his teeth chattering in the crisp air. But as he presses his bare, freezing hands flat against the dark, damp soil of the western bank, he begins to weep. They are quiet, silent tears that mingle with the river water dripping from his face. He has crossed the Great Divide. He has stepped through the black water and survived. The fisherman kneels beside him, placing a heavy, wet arm around the boy's shoulders, pulling him close in a fierce, protective embrace. They hold onto each other in the mud, entirely spent, entirely alive. All along the dark shoreline, similar silent celebrations are taking place. Men are kissing the damp earth. They are pressing their foreheads to the muddy roots of the willow trees. They have reclaimed this soil, not with tanks or with roaring guns, but with pieces of broken wood and the quiet, magnificent courage of their own beating hearts. They look back across the wide, weeping waters of the Dnieper. The fog has closed again, hiding the river in a blanket of gray. It looks just as terrifying, just as vast as it did from the other side. But it no longer holds them. They have passed through the trial of the deep water. They slowly gather their heavy, soaked coats around themselves, moving quietly into the shelter of the tall reeds to hide from the wind. They huddle together in tight circles, sharing the precious, fragile heat of their shivering bodies. They cannot build fires tonight. They must remain hidden in the dark. But the warmth they draw from one another is enough to keep the frost away. They have done the impossible. They have crossed the black water. And now, hidden in the soft, damp grass of the western shore, they can finally rest. Let the sound of the weeping river fade into a gentle, soothing lullaby. The dark waters are behind you now. You have reached the solid, welcoming earth. Feel the firm, safe ground supporting your weary body. The struggle of the current is over. You are completely safe on this quiet shore. The men are resting in the reeds, their breathing slowing, their fears washed away by the journey. Wrap the heavy, warm blanket of the night around your shoulders. Let the soft, rhythmic lapping of the water against the muddy bank carry you away, drifting peacefully, quietly, into a deep and healing sleep. There is a morning that arrives not just with the sun, but with the gentle breaking of a 900-day night. The city of Leningrad, locked for so long in its fortress of ice, silence, and starvation, wakes to a profoundly different sky. The invisible, crushing ring of steel that had suffocated the grand avenues and the narrow, winding canals has finally, miraculously, shattered. The air itself feels lighter. For nearly 3 years, the wind blowing off the dark waters of the Baltic Sea carried the heavy, metallic taste of fear, the bitter scent of smoke, and the endless, aching cold of complete isolation. But today, the wind simply smells like winter. It smells of pine, of fresh, clean snow, of a vast and open world that has suddenly returned to their doorsteps. The city is deeply scarred, a beautiful painting left out in a terrible storm. The elegant, pastel facades of the historic buildings are bruised and crumbling, their tall windows boarded up with rough, splintered plywood. Great mountains of sandbags, frozen solid into blocks of ice, still barricade the ornate doorways and the grand staircases. But today, these barricades are no longer a shield against the dark. They are simply piles of earth and wood, quiet artifacts of a nightmare that is finally fading into the morning light. From the deep cellars, from the freezing, unheated apartments where they have huddled in the shadows for so long, the people of the city slowly begin to emerge. They step out into the pale, golden sunlight of the winter morning. They are so incredibly fragile. They are emaciated, their bodies worn down to their very essence, wrapped in layer upon layer of frayed scarves, heavy woolen shawls, and oversized, threadbare coats. They move with a slow, careful deliberation, taking tiny, measured steps, as if the ground beneath their feet is made of delicate glass. They are the survivors. They have walked through the deepest valley of shadows, and they have reached the other side. There is no sudden explosion of cheering in the streets. The joy is far too vast, too overwhelming, and too deeply intertwined with sorrow for loud celebrations. Instead, there is a quiet, breathless disbelief. An eerie, beautiful stillness settles over the pavement. An old man, his face lined with the deep, permanent maps of hunger and endurance, stops on the corner of the Nevsky Prospect. He slowly reaches out his bare, trembling hand and presses his palm against the cold granite of a building. He strokes the stone, his eyes wide, looking up at the sky. He is listening. He is waiting for the wail of the sirens, the terrifying drone of the bombers that have haunted his every waking moment. But the sky is empty. It is just a beautiful, unbroken canopy of pale, frosty blue. He closes his eyes, leans his forehead against the stone, and a single, silent tear slips down his hollow cheek, catching the sunlight as it falls. As the morning deepens, the sun climbs higher, casting long, radiant rays through the icy air. It touches the battered monuments of the city, warming the bronze and the stone. The great statue of the bronze horseman, still hidden beneath a protective casing of wooden planks and sand, seems to stand a little taller beneath its wooden armor. The golden spire of the Admiralty building, which had been painted a dull, muddy gray to hide it from the night sky, catches a glancing ray of light, hinting at the brilliance waiting patiently beneath the paint. The light touches the faces of the people, warming their pale cheeks, a gentle, cosmic caress welcoming them back to the living world. In a small bakery on a quiet side street, a profound and ordinary miracle is taking place. A woman stands at the counter, her breath catching in her throat, her hands trembling uncontrollably. For over 2 years, her entire universe has been measured in agonizing, microscopic increments of dark, heavy bread, tiny squares mixed with sawdust and cellulose, barely larger than a matchbox, meant to sustain a beating heart for an entire day. But today, the baker, a man with tired, incredibly kind eyes, places something entirely different on the wooden counter. It is a full, heavy, magnificent loaf of real bread. The woman does not reach for it immediately. She simply stares at it, her hands clasped tightly against her chest, as if she is afraid that touching it might cause the illusion to vanish. She leans forward, breathing in the rich, yeasty, intoxicating aroma. It smells like life. It smells like peace. When she finally picks it up, she holds it with the profound reverence one might hold a newborn child. She presses her face to the warm crust, burying her quiet sobs in the soft dough. The baker reaches across the counter and gently touches her arm. "Eat, my dear," he whispers, his own voice thick with unshed tears. "You do not have to save the crumbs today. There will be more tomorrow." It is a promise that feels entirely surreal, a gentle, soothing breaking of the famine's iron grip. But as the golden light fills the city, it also illuminates the empty spaces left behind. This is the bittersweet heart of the dawn. To survive the long night is a miracle, but to stand in the morning light without the ones you love is a quiet, heavy cross to bear. In every apartment and every hallway, there is an echoing, profound silence. The survivors return to their rooms and look at the empty chairs drawn up to the table. They look at the unmade beds, the forgotten teacups resting on the windowsills, the pairs of small shoes sitting quietly by the door. A mother sits at a small wooden table, entirely alone in her cold room. She holds a fading photograph of her husband and her young daughter. She traces their smiling faces with a trembling finger, memorizing the curves of their cheeks, the light in their eyes. She does not weep with the frantic, tearing grief of the early days. She weeps with a quiet, profound exhaustion. She has spent every ounce of her strength simply keeping their memory alive in the freezing dark, and now, in the light of the dawn, the reality of their absence settles softly over her shoulders like a heavy woolen blanket. Outside the city, where the snow lies in deep, rolling drifts across the massive, silent fields of the memorial cemeteries. A solitary figure walks among the unmarked mounds. It is a young woman, her shoulders hunched against the winter breeze. She carries a tiny, precious piece of the fresh bread she received that morning. She stops before a vast stretch of unbroken snow, kneeling down with exquisite care. She brushes a thin layer of frost from the frozen earth with her mitten, creating a small, clean space. She gently places the bread on the ground, a silent, sacred offering. "The sun is shining today," she whispers to the frozen earth, her voice a soothing, melodic murmur in the quiet air. "The barricades are coming down. We made it through the long dark. I brought you this, just to tell you that the morning has come." She speaks not to avoid, but to the lingering, gentle spirits of the city. The survivors of Leningrad do not leave their ghosts behind in the shadows. They carry them forward into the light, holding their memories gently in their hearts, weaving their names into the very fabric of the breaking dawn. As the afternoon approaches, a new, gentle sound begins to echo through the streets. It is the sound of hammers pulling nails, of heavy wooden boards being pried away from the glass. The people are beginning to dismantle the barricades. A young boy, wielding a crowbar that is almost as tall as he is, pulls a piece of thick plywood away from a ground-floor window. As the wood falls away with a soft thud, a brilliant shaft of natural sunlight suddenly pours into the dark room inside, illuminating millions of dust motes dancing peacefully in the beam. The light touches the faded wallpaper, the cold fireplace, the worn rugs. It is a quiet, breathtaking resurrection. For the first time in 900 days, the city is opening its eyes. The heavy, dark curtains are pulled back. The invisible walls have fallen. The people of Leningrad stand by their uncovered windows, looking out at the open streets, taking long, deep breaths of the cold, clean air. The unimaginable trial is over. The quiet heroism of simply refusing to fade away has triumphed over the deepest cold. They have endured with a quiet, stubborn grace, sharing their meager warmth, reading poetry in the dark, and holding on to the fragile spark of their humanity until the storm finally broke. Let the golden light of this long-awaited dawn wash over you. Let the heavy, crushing weight of the dark years slip away from your shoulders, falling softly to the earth. The barricades are gone. The sky is clear, and the world is finally open and breathing once again. You are entirely safe in this gentle morning light. Listen to the quiet, soothing sound of the ice melting in the sun. Listen to the steady, enduring heartbeat of the city that refused to die. Close your eyes, let the beautiful warmth touch your face, and let the profound, enduring peace of the morning carry you down into a deep, restful, and dreamless sleep. There is a deep, ancient secret kept by the whispering leaves of the birch forests. It is the height of summer in the vast, emerald woodlands of the west. The canopy above is a magnificent, swaying ocean of green, filtering the brilliant sunlight until it falls to the forest floor in soft, golden pools. The trunks of the birch trees stand like thousands of silent, white pillars, reaching up toward the sky, their papery bark peeling gently in the warm breeze. The air here is profoundly still, heavy with the sweet, damp scent of rich soil, wild ferns, and crushed pine needles. It is a place that feels older than time, a sanctuary entirely separate from the broken world beyond its edges. Through this dappled, quiet green, a great tide of men is moving. They are the advancing soldiers, walking beneath the shadows of the ancient trees. But their steps are not hurried. They do not march with the frantic, terrified energy of the long retreat from years ago. They walk with a slow, heavy reverence. They are returning. With every step their heavy boots take upon the soft, mossy earth, they are reclaiming the homeland that had been swallowed by the dark. Watch a young soldier as he moves through a waist-high sea of ferns. He is brushing the broad, green leaves aside with his hands, his rifle slung lazily across his back. He knows these woods. He grew up running through forests just like this one, hunting for wild mushrooms in the autumn dew. He reaches out and rests his rough, calloused hand against the smooth white bark of a birch tree. He closes his eyes, just for a moment, and breathes in the scent of his childhood. He carries a deep, heavy knot of anxiety in his chest. For years, he has written letters in his mind to a family he left behind in a village not far from these very woods. He has dreamed of their faces, terrified of what he might find when he finally crossed the river and walked back into the lands that had been occupied for so long. But he is not alone in the forest. Deep within the thickest, most impenetrable thickets, where the sunlight struggles to reach and the brambles grow like iron wire, the shadows are watching. They are the people who stayed behind. For years, they have been the ghosts of the birch forests. When the world shattered and their villages burned, they did not surrender. They simply vanished into the deep green, swallowed by the ancient woods. They became one with the earth. They built hidden dugouts beneath the roots of the great oaks. They learned to walk without breaking a single dry twig. They learned to speak entirely in whispers, their voices mimicking the rustle of the leaves and the sigh of the wind. They are ordinary mothers, old grandfathers, and wide-eyed children, dressed in ragged, patchwork coats made of sheepskin, woven bark, and the faded remnants of clothes they wore on the day the war began. They have lived on bitter roots, wild berries, and a fierce, stubborn refusal to fade away. A woman crouches behind the massive, moss-covered trunk of a fallen tree. Her face is smudged with dark earth, and her hair, once a deep, shining brown, is streaked with the silver of premature age and endless worry. She holds a small, frightened child tightly against her chest, pressing her hand gently over the boy's mouth to ensure he makes no sound. She hears the footsteps approaching through the ferns. The slow, rhythmic crunch of heavy boots. Her heart hammers wildly against her ribs, like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. She closes her eyes, preparing to slip deeper into the shadows, preparing to run as she has run 100 times before. But then, the wind shifts. It carries a sound through the trees. It is not the harsh, guttural shout of the enemy. It is a voice. A young, tired voice, complaining good-naturedly about a mosquito bite. And it is spoken in her own language. The woman freezes. The breath catches in her throat. She slowly, carefully, opens her eyes and peers over the top of the mossy log. She sees the young soldier in the green tunic, brushing the ferns aside. She sees the red star faded by the sun on his cap. She sees the familiar, round face of a boy who looks exactly like the sons of her own village. For a long, suspended moment, the forest is perfectly, breathlessly silent. The soldiers continue to walk, entirely unaware of the hundreds of eyes watching them from the thickets. Slowly, with trembling hands, the woman lowers her hand from the child's mouth. She stands up. The rustle of the leaves makes the young soldier stop. He turns his head, his hand instinctively reaching for the strap of his rifle. But he does not raise it. He stares into the shadows, utterly bewildered. Stepping out from the deep green, moving like a spirit emerging from the earth itself, is the woman. She walks into a pool of golden sunlight. She is incredibly thin, her clothes hanging from her fragile frame, her bare feet dark with the soil of the forest. Behind her, the ferns begin to part. One by one, the ghosts of the forest step out into the light. Old men leaning on carved wooden walking sticks. Young girls with wild, tangled hair. They emerge from the dugouts, from the ravines, from the heavy shadows of the pines. They walk toward the soldiers with slow, hesitant steps, their eyes wide with a disbelief so profound it borders on terror. The soldiers stand completely still, paralyzed by the sight. They had come prepared to fight a war of iron and fire. They had not prepared for this. They had not prepared to meet the broken, beautiful heart of their own country walking out of the woods. The woman stops a few feet from the young soldier. She looks at his face, mapping the exhaustion, the dust, the youth. She slowly raises a trembling, dirt-stained hand. She reaches out and gently touches the rough wool of his sleeve. She needs to feel it. She needs to know that he is not a dream born of hunger and despair. "You came back," she whispers. Her voice is cracked, dry as an autumn leaf. The young soldier looks down at her hand, and then up into her eyes. The heavy knot of anxiety in his chest suddenly, violently breaks. "We are here, Mother," he replies, his voice breaking. "We are here." And then, the quiet of the forest shatters. It does not shatter with the sound of artillery, but with the profound, overwhelming sound of weeping. It is a wave of pure, unfiltered emotion that sweeps through the trees. Soldiers, men who have walked through unimaginable storms of steel without shedding a single tear, drop their rifles into the soft moss. They fall to their knees. They open their arms, catching the fragile, ragged bodies of the partisans as they rush forward. Everywhere you look in the golden light of the birch forest, there is a frantic, desperate searching. People are running through the crowds, grabbing the shoulders of the soldiers, wiping the dirt from the faces of the partisans, looking for the familiar shape of a nose, the familiar curve of a smile. An older soldier, a man with a thick, graying beard, walks frantically among the survivors. He is looking for his wife and his young daughter, whom he left in a village just on the edge of these woods 3 years ago. He calls out her name, his voice echoing through the trees, heavy with a rising, terrifying panic. He turns a corner around a large oak tree. There, sitting on a fallen log, is a young woman. She is wearing a faded blue headscarf, holding a small wooden bowl. The soldier stops. His breath leaves him entirely. He takes a step forward. "Anna," he whispers. The young woman looks up. She stares at him. For a moment, there is no recognition. The man standing before her is aged by the war, his face lined, his eyes shadowed. But then, she looks at his hands. She looks at the small, crescent-shaped scar on his left thumb. The wooden bowl slips from her hands, tumbling into the moss. She stands up, her legs giving way almost instantly. The soldier catches her before she falls. He pulls her into a crushing, desperate embrace. He buries his face in her shoulder, breathing in the scent of wood smoke, damp wool, and the deep, rich smell of the forest. He holds her so tightly, rocking her back and forth, sobbing uncontrollably into her faded scarf. They do not speak. There are absolutely no words designed to hold the weight of a moment like this. They simply hold onto one another, two pieces of a shattered world finding their way back together in the quiet shade of the trees. As the afternoon slowly bleeds into evening, the forest is transformed. It is no longer a place of hiding. It is a place of communion. Small, warm campfires are lit among the birch trees, casting a gentle, flickering orange glow against the white bark. The soldiers open their heavy canvas packs. They bring out the greatest treasures they possess. Small, wrapped blocks of pure white sugar. Tins of meat. And bread. Real, soft, heavy bread. They break the bread with their dirty hands and pass it to the forest dwellers. The partisans receive it with a profound, quiet reverence. They eat slowly, letting the taste of the bread wash over their tongues, closing their eyes as the simple, beautiful warmth fills their empty stomachs. In return, the women of the forest offer wooden cups filled with clear, icy water drawn from the deepest, purest springs of the woods, and handfuls of sweet, wild strawberries gathered from the sunlit clearings. It is a sacred feast. They sit shoulder to shoulder around the crackling fires, the soldiers in their dusty uniforms and the ghosts in their ragged bark coats. They share the food, they share the warmth, and they share the stories of the long, terrible night they have all survived. A soldier sits with a small, ragged boy on his knee. He carefully unwraps a single piece of hard fruit candy and places it in the boy's hand. The boy looks at it in wonder, entirely captivated by the bright red color, before popping it into his mouth. The soldier smiles, resting his chin on the top of the boy's head, watching the fire dance. The deep, indigo twilight settles over the canopy of the birch forest. The stars begin to appear, peeking through the rustling leaves like tiny, benevolent eyes watching over the reunited families. The wind slows to a gentle, sweeping whisper, carrying the soothing sound of the leaves through the camp. The tears have all been shed. The desperate searching is over. The heavy, crushing weight of the unknown has finally been lifted from their shoulders. Let the gentle warmth of the campfire soothe your tired bones. Let the beautiful, quiet joy of the forest fill your heart. The lost have been found. The ghosts have returned to the light. The long, weary journey through the dark woods has finally led them back into each other's arms. You are safe here, surrounded by the ancient, protecting trees. Listen to the soft, rhythmic crackle of the fire. Listen to the gentle, hushed voices of the people who love each other, sitting close together in the dark. Close your eyes, breathe in the sweet scent of the pine and the earth, and let the deep, unbroken peace of the forest night carry you gently into sleep. There is a strange, quiet weight to a footstep that falls upon unfamiliar earth. The dust that rises from the road is no longer the dust of home. The trees that line the narrow, winding lanes cast different, angular shadows, their leaves rustling in a dialect the wind has never spoken before. For so long, the journey was measured in the desperate, heartbreaking defense of familiar things. The curving rivers they knew by name since they were children, the vast, golden steppes they had plowed in the warm spring sun, the white, silent birch forests that held the innocent memories of their youth. But now, the horizon has irrevocably shifted. They have walked so far, pushed so endlessly against the terrible storm, that they have crossed the invisible, silent line of the border. They have stepped out of the homeland, and into the vast, echoing unknown. The architecture around them begins to change, rising up like illustrations from a forgotten storybook. There are pointed, Gothic arches, steep roofs layered with overlapping red tiles that look like the scales of resting dragons, and narrow, winding streets paved with uneven cobblestones. When their heavy, worn boots strike these stones, they echo with a sharp, hollow click that bounces off the brick walls, entirely different from the soft, muffled thud of the eastern mud. The signposts at the crossroads are painted with strange, sharp letters that refuse to yield their meaning. They are walking through a world they do not know, under a sky that feels just a fraction of a shade too pale. Yet, to look at these advancing men is not to see conquerors. It is to see the very limits of human endurance. They are entirely consumed by a profound, bone-deep fatigue. It is not the sharp, burning exhaustion of a single day's labor, the kind that can be washed away by a hot meal and a good night's sleep. It is a heavy, leaden weariness that has settled permanently into the very marrow of their existence. It is the accumulated weight of thousands of miles, of hundreds of freezing nights, of 1,000 whispered goodbyes. Their uniforms are bleached to pale, dusty gray by the merciless sun of 3 endless summers, and frayed at the cuffs by the biting ice of 3 unimaginable winters. They move with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Left. Right. Left. Right. It is the stubborn momentum of memory. It is the quiet, magnificent refusal of the human body to stop until the task is finally, truly done. They walk like sleepwalkers drifting through a waking dream, their eyes fixed on the backs of the men in front of them, letting the collective motion of the column carry them forward. As they walk through these strange, foreign squares and unfamiliar fields, they do not walk alone. They carry a vast, invisible company with them. They are carrying the ghosts of their journey. The boy who shared a single, hard lump of sugar in the freezing trenches before the snows of the capital fell. The older man who hummed a gentle folk song to calm their trembling hands across the dark, weeping waters of the river. The mother who stood by a wooden gate on the burning summer plains, offering a tin cup of cool water. The friend who sat shoulder to shoulder in the ruined apartment, sharing the warmth of a single, glowing cigarette. They are all here. They walk in the quiet spaces between the living. The soldiers carry them in the deep, warm hollows of their hearts, bringing them along to see the end of the long road. When a soldier pauses to look at a strange, beautiful church spire, he is not just looking for himself. He is looking for the brother who did not make it out of the snow. He is sharing the view with the shadows. When the column finally calls a halt for the evening, resting in the center of a quiet, empty village plaza, a young soldier finds a place on the curved stone lip of a dry fountain. He unclips his heavy canvas pack, letting it fall to the cobblestones with a dull thud. His hands tremble slightly as he reaches into his breast pocket, pulling out a small, worn notebook and a stubby pencil. He rests the paper on his knee, trying to find the words to describe a world he does not understand to a woman who is waiting in a kitchen a lifetime away. "My dearest," he writes, his handwriting slow and careful. "The sky here is the same blue, but the earth feels entirely different beneath my boots. We walked through a town today with roofs that look like nothing I have ever seen. I saw a small bird in the hedgerow with bright yellow wings, and it sang a song I could not name. I am so very far from our window." He pauses, pressing the heel of his hand against his tired eyes. "My feet ache in a way that I cannot properly describe. It is a tiredness that makes me want to lie down in the grass and sleep for 100 years. We are all so quiet now. But the wind is blowing west. They say the end is hiding just beyond the next range of hills. It feels strange to think of it. I look at the unfamiliar stars here, and I only search for the ones that I know shine over our home. Keep the lamp lit. The road is finally turning back to you." He folds the paper, his heart aching with a fragile, terrifying hope. To have survived so much, to have walked so endlessly, makes the very idea of the end feel like a delicate glass ornament. It is something so precious, so desperately desired, that he is almost afraid to hold it in his mind, terrified that if he hopes too fiercely, it might simply shatter. Down a narrow, winding alleyway off the main plaza, a heavy wooden door slowly, cautiously creaks open. An old woman steps out onto the stone step. She wears a thick, dark shawl pulled tightly around her frail shoulders, her hands deeply wrinkled and worn by a lifetime of hard labor. She is a citizen of this foreign land. She speaks a language the soldiers do not know, and she has spent years watching the world turn to ash around her. An older infantryman, his shoulders stooped, his face coated in the pale dust of the road, stops and looks at her. They are strangers, born of different soils, separated by borders, politics, and a world of shattered glass. But as they look at one another in the fading evening light, the differences simply melt away. They share the exact same, universal language of exhaustion. He sees the quiet, enduring fear and the profound weariness in her pale eyes. She looks at him and sees the hollow, sunken shadows of his cheeks, the heavy slump of his shoulders, the absolute, heartbreaking fatigue of a man who just wants to go home. She does not see an invader. She sees the tired son of a distant mother. She reaches into the deep pocket of her woolen apron. Her hand trembles slightly as she holds it out toward him. Resting in her wrinkled palm is a single, small green apple. The soldier looks at the fruit, and then up at her face. He takes off his faded cap, revealing hair that has gone prematurely gray. He reaches out with a gentle, soot-stained hand and takes the apple. He bows his head to her, a deep, quiet, and profoundly human gesture of thanks. He does not know the words for gratitude in her tongue, and she does not need to hear them. It is a brief, fleeting moment of pure grace on a foreign street. A silent acknowledgement that beneath the uniforms and the borders, they are all simply weary travelers longing for the morning. As the twilight deepens into a soft, bruised violet, the camp settles into the night. They are out of the cities now, camping in a vast, rolling meadow that smells of unfamiliar wildflowers and damp clover. Two friends, a schoolteacher and a farmer, lie on their backs in the tall grass. The farmer reaches down, running his thick fingers through the soil. He rubs the dirt between his thumb and forefinger, feeling the texture in the dark. "It is lighter here," the farmer whispers, his voice thick with sleep. "Sandier. Not like the dark, heavy earth back home. It doesn't smell like our rain." The schoolteacher smiles gently in the dark. He looks up at the vast canopy of the night. The dirt may be different, my friend, he replies softly. But look up. The sky hasn't changed. The Great Bear is right there, exactly where he has always been. We are still under the same roof. The farmer hums a quiet sound of agreement, letting his hand rest on the foreign earth. It is hard ground, but tonight it will hold him. It will grant him rest. The heavy, dragging footsteps of the long day have finally fallen silent. The boots are unlaced, giving sweet, profound relief to aching, blistered feet. The invisible ghosts of the journey gather close in the dark, watching over the sleeping men, their silent presence a comforting blanket against the chill of the unknown air. The end of the long road is near. The distance is closing. But for tonight, there is no more walking. There is only the quiet, rhythmic breathing of thousands of men, resting their weary heads on foreign soil, dreaming of familiar things. Let the immense, heavy fatigue drain from your own limbs. Feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders, floating away into the soft, violet night. You have walked far enough. The stars above are the same stars that watch over the places you love. You are safe under their constant, gentle light. Close your eyes. Let the quiet rustle of the foreign wind lull you into peace. Rest your tired feet, surrender to the stillness, and let the gentle, soothing dark carry you away into a deep and dreamless sleep. There is a fragile, terrifying kind of hope that blooms only when you can finally see the end of a very long dark. It is the gentle, waking breath of the final spring, a season that has arrived with a soft, forgiving warmth to touch the weary earth. The air carries the delicate, impossibly sweet scent of damp soil and blossoming cherry trees, a fragrance that feels almost entirely out of place here. Because just beyond the blooming branches, rising up like a dark, jagged mountain range against the pale morning sky, stands the final city. The last iron threshold. For the men and women who have walked across a continent to reach these gates, the city does not look like a prize. It looks like a heavy, exhausted sigh. They have been walking for so many years that the journey has simply become the only world they know. Their boots have worn smooth, taking on the shape of 1,000 different roads, 100 different fields. Their heavy coats are faded by the sun of the endless steppes and thinned by the blizzards of the deep winter. They are carrying a profound, bone-deep fatigue that cannot be measured. It is an exhaustion so complete that it has hollowed them out, leaving only the quiet, stubborn rhythm of their beating hearts. As they sit in the damp spring grass, looking at the shadows of the tall buildings in the distance, a new and entirely different kind of fear begins to settle over them. It is no longer the vast, overwhelming terror of the early years, when the sky seemed to be falling and the earth was shrinking beneath their feet. That fear was born of the terrifying unknown. This new fear is born of proximity. It is the breathtaking, fragile realization that the end is actually, truly within reach. When you are 1,000 miles from home, survival is a distant dream, a prayer whispered into the freezing wind. But when you are standing at the very gates of the final dawn, survival becomes a desperate, aching hunger. They do not want to be heroes today. They do not want to carve their names into the cold stone. They simply want to live. They want to breathe in the spring air tomorrow. They want to see the sun rise on a world that is finally, beautifully quiet. Watch a young medic sitting beneath the protective shadow of a low, crumbling wall. Her canvas medical bag, worn and stained by years of frantic, whispered prayers, rests beside her in the soft clover. She is pulling a thin, wooden comb through her hair. It is a slow, deliberate movement. With every gentle stroke, she is trying to untangle the heavy memories of the journey. She looks down at her hands. They have held so much sorrow, patched so many broken pieces of the world. She closes her eyes and makes a silent, fierce promise to herself. Just a few more days, she thinks. Just a few more streets, and then these hands can learn how to plant a garden. Just let me live long enough to see the garden. A few yards away, an older soldier with a thick, graying mustache sits with his back against the trunk of a broad linden tree. He has a small, wrinkled photograph resting on his knee. It is a picture of a little boy standing next to a wooden fence. The soldier has looked at this photograph every single day since the first summer of the retreat. He has carried this fragile paper child across burning plains, through freezing trenches, and over dark, weeping rivers. He traces the edge of the photograph with a thumb that is rough and scarred by iron. The boy in the picture must be so tall by now. He must know how to read his own name. The older soldier feels a sudden, sharp ache in his chest, a desperate, overwhelming need to simply walk through his own front door and see how much the boy has grown. He carefully slides the photograph back into his breast pocket, resting his hand over his heart to make sure it is safe. He looks at the young man sitting beside him, a boy who is nervously twisting a piece of dry grass between his dirt-stained fingers. "We are almost there, little brother," the older man whispers, his voice as soft as the rustling leaves above them. "The long road stops here. We just have to step over the threshold." The younger boy nods, swallowing hard, looking at the dark shapes of the buildings. "I keep thinking about the rain," he murmurs, his voice trembling slightly. "I want to sit on my mother's porch and watch the rain fall, and know that I don't have to sleep in the mud ever again." "You will," the older man replies, wrapping a heavy, comforting arm around the boy's narrow shoulders. "We will watch the rain together. Just stay close to me today. We simply step forward, and then we go home." This is the quiet, desperate bargaining that fills the spring morning. They are gathering the very last ounces of their strength, scraping the bottom of their souls for the courage to walk into the shadows of the final city. They are holding onto one another, bound by a profound, fragile hope that they will all make it to the other side of the dark. But this proximity to the end also carries a bittersweet, heartbreaking tragedy. In these final, fading hours of the long night, not everyone will cross the threshold. After walking through thousands of miles of fire and ice, after surviving the absolute impossible, there are those who will fall when the finish line is entirely visible. It does not happen with grand, dramatic noise. It happens quietly, in the dust and the rubble of the strange, foreign streets. A soldier who had carried his friend through the blinding blizzards of the deep winter, who had shared his last crumb of dark bread in the freezing mud, simply stops walking. He leans against the side of a ruined brick wall, closing his eyes as a profound, overwhelming tiredness finally overtakes him. He slips down the wall, his heavy coat rustling softly, coming to rest on the broken cobblestones. His friends gather around him, their faces pale beneath the dust of the road. They kneel beside him, taking his calloused hands, brushing the fine, gray ash from his forehead. The air is suddenly incredibly still. There is no shouting, no intense anger. There is only a deep, bottomless well of sorrow. "You are so close," one of his friends whispers, his voice breaking, tears cutting clean paths through the soot on his cheeks. "Please, brother. We can see the end. We are almost home." But the fallen soldier simply smiles, a faint, peaceful curve of his dry lips. The heavy burden he has carried for so long is finally lifting from his chest. He looks up at the small patch of blue sky visible between the broken roofs. "Tell my mother," he breathes, his voice entirely soft, fading like a gentle echo, "tell her that I saw the spring." He closes his eyes, and his long, terrible journey is over. His friends do not leave him on the cold stones. They lift him gently, carrying him with the exquisite care one might use to carry a sleeping child. They weep, their tears falling silently into the dust of the foreign city. It is a tragedy so profound, so terribly unjust, to have survived the entire, raging storm only to be swept away by the final drop of rain. They reach into his pockets and take his letters, the small, folded pieces of his heart that he had carried so carefully. They promise to deliver them. They promise to carry his memory over the threshold for him. They will be his eyes when the dawn finally breaks. They will be his voice when the silence returns to the world. They will carry him in their hearts, a quiet, invisible passenger on the long train ride home. As the afternoon shadows begin to lengthen, turning the ruined streets into canyons of soft, violet light, the weary column prepares to take the final steps. They stand up from the damp grass. They brush the clover from their heavy coats. They adjust the thick canvas straps of their packs one last time. The air is still sweet with the scent of the cherry blossoms, a gentle, fragrant reminder that the world is ready to heal, ready to bloom again. They look at the city before them. The iron gates, the broken stones, the heavy silence waiting in the shadows. They take a deep, collective breath, pulling the warm spring air into their tired lungs. They do not charge. They simply walk forward. They walk with the slow, steady rhythm of people who have learned that endurance is the quietest, most powerful force on the earth. Left. Right. Left. Right. The rhythmic, hypnotic heartbeat of survival. They are carrying the overwhelming exhaustion of an entire generation upon their shoulders, but they are also carrying the brilliant, beautiful spark of the morning. They hold their heads up, their eyes fixed on the horizon, walking through the last iron threshold, stepping away from the long night and into the gentle, waiting promise of tomorrow. Let the heavy weariness of the journey begin to lift from your own shoulders. The longest road is finally coming to an end. Feel the soft, forgiving warmth of the spring air surrounding you, carrying the sweet scent of the blossoms. You do not need to walk any further today. The final steps have been taken. The threshold has been crossed. You are safe now, entirely sheltered, surrounded by the quiet, enduring love of the friends who have carried you this far. Listen to the gentle, rhythmic sound of their footsteps, slow and steady, fading beautifully into the peaceful twilight. Let the quiet, bittersweet peace of the evening wash over you. Close your eyes, let go of the day, and let the soft, protective dark guide you into a deep, restful, and unbroken sleep. There is a silence that falls at the end of the world, and it is the heaviest, most beautiful sound you will ever hear. For longer than memory could hold, the air had been made entirely of thunder. The sky had been a canvas of roaring iron, and the earth had been a trembling, frightened thing. The mind had grown so accustomed to the deafening, frantic rhythm of survival that the noise had simply become the weather. But now, in the very heart of the great, ruined capital, the storm has finally broken. The great, terrible machine of the dark has ground to a halt. The guns have fallen silent. It does not happen with a grand, sweeping crescendo. It happens slowly, like a clock winding down in an empty room. A final, distant echo rolls through the jagged canyons of the shattered streets, bouncing off the broken facades and the fallen statues, until it simply fades away into the soft, blue spring sky. And then, there is nothing. Only the gentle, sweeping whisper of the wind moving through the empty windows, and the soft, dry sound of plaster dust drifting down to the cobblestones like pale, gray snow. To the men and women standing in the rubble of the ruined halls, this silence is entirely surreal. It is a physical weight, pressing against their ears, filling the hollows of their exhausted chests. They do not cheer. There are no sudden, soaring shouts of triumph echoing through the grand, broken plazas. The human heart, having carried the crushing weight of a continent's sorrow for so long, does not simply leap into joy. It requires time to understand that the burden has actually been lifted. Instead, a dreamlike, disorienting stillness settles over the soldiers. They look around, their faces coated in the thick, pale dust of the final days, their eyes wide and blinking against the quiet light of the afternoon. Watch a small group of infantrymen standing in what used to be a grand, vaulted hallway. The roof above them has been torn open, revealing the vast, peaceful canopy of the heavens. Great blocks of carved stone and shattered marble columns litter the floor, turning the hall into a jagged landscape of gray and white. Slowly, as if moving underwater, one of the men lets his heavy canvas pack slip from his shoulders. It hits the dust with a soft, muffled thud. He looks down at it, as if he does not quite recognize what it is. And then, he simply sits down. He finds a smooth piece of fallen marble, warm from the afternoon sun, and he rests. Beside him, another soldier follows. Then another. All down the ruined street, all through the shattered halls and the echoing corridors, the men and women of the long road are sitting down. They lean their heavy heads back against the stone walls. They stretch their aching, blistered legs out into the open air. For the first time in years, they do not have to hide in the shadows. They do not have to keep their heads low. They can sit in the open sunlight, completely exposed, and absolutely nothing will fall from the sky. It is a freedom so vast, so incredibly profound, that the mind struggles to hold it. A young medic, her uniform stained with the dark maps of 100 different days, sits on the steps of a broken monument. She rests her chin in her hands, looking out over the sea of rubble. The spring breeze gently lifts a stray lock of hair from her forehead. It is a warm breeze, carrying the faint, sweet scent of blooming linden trees from a surviving park nearby. She closes her eyes and takes a deep, slow breath. She breathes in the scent of the dust, the stone, and the distant flowers. She holds the air in her lungs, savoring the absolute miracle of a peaceful breath. She thinks of the freezing trenches outside the capital, the dark, weeping waters of the great rivers, the endless, burning plains. It feels as though she has lived 1,000 different lifetimes to reach this single, quiet step in the sun. She slowly opens her eyes, and a single, silent tear slips down her dusty cheek. It is not a tear of sadness. It is the overflow of a heart that is finally allowed to feel something other than fear. A few yards away, an older soldier reaches into the deep pocket of his coat. His fingers brush against a small, stubby piece of black charcoal he found in the ashes of a fire days ago. He stands up, his joints popping and aching in the quiet air. He walks over to a tall, relatively smooth section of the remaining wall. With slow, deliberate movements, he begins to write on the stone. He does not write a boast. He does not write a grand declaration of victory. He simply writes his name. He writes the name of his small, quiet village, a place of wooden houses and birch trees thousands of miles away. And then, he writes the names of the 3 friends who began the journey with him, the friends who are sleeping beneath the snows and the fields far behind him. He traces the black letters over and over until they are thick and dark against the pale stone. By writing their names, he is bringing them across the finish line. He is telling the silent, ruined halls that they were here. That they mattered. That they made it to the very end of the world. He steps back, his hand resting gently against the stone, offering a quiet, whispered promise to the ghosts he has carried in his heart for so long. Rest now, he murmurs to the silent air. We have reached the end. You can rest. Above them, high on the shattered dome of the grandest building in the city, something is moving in the wind. The soldiers sitting on the rubble slowly lift their heads, shading their eyes against the glare of the sun. There, snapping gently against the pale blue sky, is a flag. It is a deep, brilliant red, a stark, breathtaking contrast to the endless ocean of gray stone and white dust below. It dances in the spring breeze, vibrant and alive. To the men and women looking up from the ruins, that flag is not a symbol of politics or empires. It is something far simpler and infinitely more beautiful. It is the period at the end of a very long, very dark sentence. It is the ultimate, undeniable proof that the nightmare is actually over. When they look at that red cloth waving in the sun, they do not see a conquered city. They see their own front doors. They see the smoke rising from their mother's chimneys. They see the soft, golden wheat fields of the steppes, waiting to be planted. The flag simply means home. A young farm boy, his face covered in soot, stares up at the sky. He is so tired that his vision blurs, but he refuses to look away from the color red. He reaches out blindly, his hand finding the sleeve of the older man sitting beside him. He grips the rough wool tightly, his knuckles white. Is it really over? The boy whispers, his voice trembling, fragile as a dry leaf. Are we truly going to stop walking? The older man does not look at the boy. He keeps his eyes fixed on the flag, his own chest rising and falling in slow, heavy waves of emotion. He gently places his hand over the boy's trembling fingers, squeezing them with a fierce, reassuring warmth. "It's over, little brother," the older man breathes, his voice thick with tears he can no longer hold back. "The guns are asleep. We are going home." Around them, in the surreal, dreamlike stillness of the ruined plaza, small, quiet moments of humanity are blooming like tiny flowers in the cracks of the stones. Two soldiers, sitting back to back on a fallen pillar, are sharing the very last drops of water from a battered tin canteen. They pass it back and forth with a slow, ritualistic reverence, savoring the cool liquid as it washes the dust from their dry throats. Another man has pulled his boots off entirely. He sits with his bare feet resting on the warm cobblestones, wiggling his toes in the open air. He is looking at his own feet with a look of pure, unadulterated wonder, simply marveling at the fact that he does not have to force them to take another step into the fire. And from somewhere deep within the labyrinth of the shattered halls, a sound begins to drift through the quiet air. It is the soft, melancholic hum of a silver harmonica. Someone has found a quiet corner, pulled an old instrument from their pocket, and is playing a slow, gentle folk song. The notes float out over the rubble, weaving through the broken arches and the fallen beams. It is a song about a quiet river, about a girl waiting by a wooden gate, about the simple, enduring beauty of a peaceful evening. The soldiers sitting in the plaza close their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The song fills the empty, echoing spaces of the ruined city. It softens the harsh, jagged edges of the broken world. It is a lullaby for the survivors. As the afternoon slowly surrenders to the evening, the light in the city begins to change. The harsh, bright glare of the sun softens into a rich, liquid gold, bathing the gray ruins in a warm, forgiving glow. The shadows stretch out across the plazas, long and deep, turning the shattered landscape into a painting of soft purples and muted blues. The air grows cool, but it is not the bitter, biting cold of the winter. It is the gentle, soothing coolness of the spring night. The soldiers do not build trenches tonight. They do not set up watch guards with nervous, sweeping eyes. They simply pull their heavy canvas coats around their shoulders and lean against one another in the dust. They are surrounded by the skeletons of a fallen empire, sitting in the very center of the storm's aftermath, but they are wrapped in an absolute, profound peace. The fear has evaporated, leaving behind a vast, quiet emptiness that is slowly being filled by the gentle light of the stars. Look up at the sky with them. It is vast, clear, and entirely empty of danger. The same stars that are shining over the quiet, sleeping villages of their homeland are shining down on the ruined halls of the city. The world is finally, wonderfully whole again. Let the beautiful, heavy silence of the evening wash over you. Feel the incredible, weightless relief of knowing that the hardest part of the journey is entirely in the past. There is no more walking to do. There is no more waiting in the dark. The storm has passed, the dust has settled, and the air is clear and sweet. Listen to the gentle, distant song of the harmonica, floating softly through the quiet night. Listen to the slow, steady, peaceful breathing of the heroes resting in the shadows. You are safe. The world is safe. Close your eyes, let the heavy burdens of the day slip from your hands, and let the quiet, enduring peace of the final night carry you softly into a deep, beautiful, and dreamless sleep. There is a gentle, hypnotic rhythm to a train carrying heavy hearts back to the places they love. It is the slow, rhythmic song of the endless rails, a metallic lullaby composed of heavy iron wheels rolling steadily over the steel tracks. For years, the only sounds these men and women knew were the frantic, terrifying noises of a world tearing itself apart. But now, the great storm has finally passed, and the earth has exhaled a long, trembling breath of peace. The train moves with a comforting, swaying motion, a slow and rocking embrace that carries the weary travelers eastward, away from the ruined halls of foreign cities, and back toward the rising sun. Through the wide, open doors of the wooden freight cars, the warm summer breeze pours in, carrying the sweet, clean scent of blooming wildflowers, damp earth, and distant pine forests. The soldiers sit on the wooden floorboards, their legs dangling over the edge, watching the continent roll slowly by. They are entirely silent. It is not the tense, frightened silence of the trenches, nor the exhausted, hollow silence of the long retreat. It is a deep, reflective quiet. It is the silence of a soul slowly beginning to understand that it is finally safe. Outside, the landscape is a tapestry of profound, bittersweet healing. The earth, which had been so deeply scarred and broken by the heavy machinery of the dark years, is quietly reclaiming its own. As the train rolls past the vast, rolling plains, the soldiers look out at the deep, winding trenches they had dug with bleeding hands so many seasons ago. The sharp, chalky edges of the dugouts have been softened by the spring rains. The dark, turned soil is now covered in a vibrant, thick blanket of bright green grass. Wild chamomile and delicate blue cornflowers have pushed their way through the remnants of the sandbags, nodding gently in the wind. Here and there, the rusted, silent skeleton of a fallen tank sits in the middle of a golden wheat field. It no longer looks terrifying. It looks small, defeated, and ancient. The vines of wild ivy have already begun to wrap around its cold iron treads, pulling it back down into the earth. The world is stubborn in its desire to live, hiding the terrible scars of the past beneath a gentle, forgiving layer of blooming life. Inside the train car, the golden afternoon sunlight filters through the gaps in the wooden slats, casting warm, striped patterns across the tired faces of the passengers. Watch the older soldier sitting in the corner, his back resting against his canvas pack. His hair, which was dark as a raven's wing when he first walked away from his farm, is now entirely silver. The deep lines etched into the corners of his eyes hold the shadows of the long winter, the dust of the steppe, and the immense, heavy grief of the things he has seen. Yet, as he looks out at the passing birch forests, there is a profound, softening peace in his gaze. He reaches into the breast pocket of his faded tunic, his fingers brushing against a small, carefully folded piece of paper. It is the last letter he received from his wife, delivered to him in the ruins of a city whose name he has already decided to forget. He does not need to unfold it to know the words, they are woven into the very fabric of his heart. "The roof has been patched," she wrote. "The apple trees are heavy with fruit this year. We are waiting for you." He rests his hand over his chest, feeling the steady, calm beating of his own heart. He is returning to her. He is returning to the apple trees. But he also knows, with a quiet, heavy certainty, that the man returning on this train is not the same man who left. He is carrying a vast, invisible landscape of memories within him, a quiet country of ghosts and shadows that he will walk through for the rest of his life. Across from him sits a young boy, barely out of his teenage years, though his eyes hold the ancient, weary depth of a seasoned elder. He is meticulously carving a small piece of soft pine wood with a pocket knife. He is making a tiny wooden horse, its mane carefully etched, its legs smooth and rounded. He blows the soft wood shavings from his lap, holding the little horse up to the sunlight to inspect his work. He is making it for a little sister who was only an infant when he marched away. He wonders if she will recognize his face. He wonders if the sound of his footsteps on the wooden porch will frighten her. He holds the little wooden toy tightly in his palm, a fragile, hopeful bridge between the boy who went into the fire and the brother who is finally coming home. As the train slowly crosses the invisible borders and travels deeper into the heartland, the vast, sweeping beauty of the Soviet earth opens up to welcome them. The sky here feels wider, the blue a deeper, more familiar shade. The great, slow-moving rivers reflect the clouds like massive ribbons of fallen sky. The air smells of rich, black soil and wood smoke. It smells like home. Eventually, the rhythmic clacking of the wheels begins to slow. The train approaches a small, rural station, a modest wooden platform surrounded by a sea of anxious, waiting faces. The arrival is a beautiful, devastating symphony of emotion. Before the train even comes to a complete halt, the heavy wooden doors are pushed wide open. The platform is a sea of colorful headscarves, worn coats, and hands reaching up toward the sky. When the soldiers step down onto the wooden planks, the air shatters with the sound of weeping. But it is the weeping of profound, overwhelming joy. Wives throw their arms around the necks of husbands they feared they would never see again, burying their faces in the dusty wool of their tunics, breathing in the scent of them, refusing to let go. Fathers kneel on the wooden boards, pulling young, bewildered children into their chests, tears cutting clean paths through the soot and dirt on their cheeks. It is a chaotic, beautiful tangle of reunion. The deep, heavy knot of waiting, pulled so tightly around the hearts of these families for years, is finally, violently untied. But beneath the joyous cries and the desperate embraces, there is another, quieter story unfolding on the edges of the platform. It is the profound, beautiful tragedy of the empty hands. Stand near the edge of the crowd and watch the old woman with the dark, woven shawl pulled tightly around her frail shoulders. She stands perfectly still as the tide of humanity rushes past her. Her eyes, pale and filled with a fragile, desperate hope, scan the faces of the men stepping down from the dark boxcars. She looks at the tall men, the young boys, the men with silver hair. She searches for the exact curve of a jaw, the familiar shape of a brow, the laughing eyes of the boy she sent away. The train cars slowly empty. The platform begins to clear as families walk away together, their arms wrapped tightly around one another, leaning their heads together as they walk down the dirt roads toward their homes. The old woman remains standing on the platform. The final soldier steps down from the train. He is a young man, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. He stops, looking at the old woman. He sees the unbearable, quiet realization settling over her frail shoulders. He sees the light in her pale eyes slowly dim and extinguish, replaced by a vast, bottomless sorrow. He does not know her son. He does not know which field, which river, or which ruined city holds him. But he knows the grief. He slowly takes the faded cap from his head, revealing hair flattened by sweat and dust. He steps toward her, his movements incredibly gentle. He reaches out and takes her small, trembling hand in his own large, calloused fingers. He does not offer hollow comforts. He does not speak of glory or grand victories. He simply bows his head, pressing her hand gently to his chest, offering her the profound, silent solidarity of a shared heartbreak. He stands with her in the quiet afternoon, holding her sorrow, a silent witness to the unimaginable price that was paid for the quiet sky above them. This is the bittersweet reality of the journey's end. The peace they have won is beautiful, vast, and enduring, but it is a peace bought with the heaviest coin imaginable. For those who walk down the familiar dirt paths and push open their own wooden gates, the joy of return is forever mingled with the quiet echoes of absence. Imagine the soldier pushing open the heavy wooden door of his childhood home. The warm, golden light from the hearth spills across the wooden floorboards. The smell of baking bread and boiling potatoes fills the air, a scent so comforting and familiar it brings him instantly to his knees. His family gathers around him, their hands touching his face, his hair, his shoulders, making absolutely sure he is real. They sit down at the small, wooden dining table. The ceramic plates are set, the hot tea is poured. But there, at the end of the table, is an empty wooden chair. It is the chair where an older brother used to sit, the brother who fell in the freezing mud outside the capital. Or perhaps it is the chair of the father, who held the line in the ruined city of ash and bone and never returned. The empty chair holds a profound, heavy silence. It is a monument carved not of stone, but of space. As the family sits together, savoring the miraculous taste of the hot food and the gentle safety of their own walls, they look at the empty chair. They do not turn away from it. They raise their tin cups of hot tea, a silent, loving toast to the ghosts who purchased this quiet evening with their very lives. They will keep the chair empty, a sacred space of memory and love, carrying the lost forward with them into the new dawn. As the long day finally bleeds away, the sun sinks below the edge of the great steppes, painting the sky in deep, bruised purples and brilliant, fading oranges. The twilight settles over the land, gentle and cool. The vast, scarred continent is finally, truly going to sleep. The trains sit quietly on the rails, their massive iron engines cooling in the night air, ticking softly as the metal contracts. The great, roaring fires of the past years have all burned out. All that remains are the soft, glowing embers in the hearths of a million quiet homes. The soldier lies back in his own bed, the mattress soft and forgiving beneath his aching back. He looks up at the ceiling, listening to the impossibly beautiful, ordinary sounds of the house. The soft creak of the floorboards as his wife moves through the kitchen. The quiet, rhythmic breathing of his child sleeping in the next room. The gentle rustle of the wind moving through the apple trees outside the open window. There are no sirens. There are no distant rumbles of thunder. There is only the wind, and the earth, and the enduring, magnificent beat of the human heart. The long journey is over. The heavy boots are unlaced, left by the door to gather the dust of peace. The heavy canvas coats are hung on their pegs. The letters have been delivered, the promises have been kept, and the tears have watered the earth, promising new growth in the spring. Let the gentle, rhythmic swaying of the train fade entirely from your mind. Let the heavy, crushing weight of the world's sorrow slip away, carried off by the cool night wind. You have walked the long road, and you have reached the quiet sanctuary of home. The fire has burned down to a soft, warm glow. The embers radiate a gentle, soothing heat, pushing back the shadows, filling the room with a peaceful, protective light. There is absolutely nothing left for you to carry. The sacrifices have been made, the dawn has been secured, and the world is finally safe for dreaming. Close your eyes. Feel the soft, heavy blanket of the night wrapped securely around your shoulders. Listen to the absolute, breathtaking silence of peace. Let your breathing slow, matching the gentle rhythm of the sleeping earth. The long day is done. The endless rails have led you home. Just rest your tired heart, and let the quiet, beautiful dark carry you away into a deep, endless, and healing sleep.